The courtroom was eerily quiet as Sam Ford stood at the edge of the defendant's table. Her heart raced, not from fear, but from the electrifying pulse of excitement that coursed through her veins. She was a teenager, barely 16 years old, and there she was, standing in front of a judge, a jury, and a courtroom full of professionals who had no idea who they were dealing with. Judge Thompson, a middle-aged man with a stern face and the posture of someone who had seen it all, glanced down at Sam with a smirk that seemed to scream, "What could you possibly know about law, young lady?" The room buzzed with the murmurs of spectators and court staff, some of them visibly amused by her youthful appearance. Sam was dressed in a simple button-up shirt and a pair of worn jeans, far from the formal suits worn by the lawyers around her. She didn't look like a lawyer, she didn't look like anyone who would belong in this courtroom at all. "Ms. Ford," Judge Thompson began, his voice laced with an unmistakable condescension, "I trust you understand the gravity of the situation here. You're representing your friend, Lucas, accused of theft. I assume you've done your homework and know the law." The question wasn't so much a genuine inquiry as it was a sarcastic jab. His tone made it clear he didn't believe she had any chance of success, much less the ability to represent anyone in a courtroom. Sam's stomach tightened, but she didn't flinch. She had been preparing for this moment for years. Her entire life had led up to this, the moment when she would prove herself to the world. A world that often dismissed her for her age, her gender, and her unconventional ambition. She had been studying law since she was a little girl, reading books her peers didn't even know existed, absorbing everything from case law to legal strategies. But the truth was, this moment wasn't about just proving the facts of the case. This was about proving that she, Samantha Ford, was more than just a teenager with a dream. She was a force to be reckoned with. The judge looked at her expectantly, still with a faint, mocking smile on his face. Sam took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the room on her shoulders. She stood tall, locking eyes with him, and then with the jury, a group of 5 men and 7 women, all skeptical of what a teenager could possibly offer them in the pursuit of justice. "Your Honor," Sam began, her voice steady and clear, "I've done more than just study the law. I've lived it. And today, I'm here to make sure the truth comes out, not just for Lucas, but for everyone in this room." A few people in the room chuckled, but Sam didn't flinch. She could feel the judgmental stares, but she kept her focus sharp. Lucas was counting on her. This wasn't just a case, it was personal. Lucas was her best friend, and she knew he was innocent. But more than that, she knew the stakes. It wasn't just about winning a case, it was about proving herself. Proving that a teenager like her could walk into a courtroom and bring justice. Proving that no one could laugh her off just because of her age. Judge Thompson raised an eyebrow, his smirk widening. "Well then, Miss Ford," he said, settling back in his chair, "I'll give you the benefit of the doubt. But don't think for one second that I'll tolerate any games in my courtroom." Sam nodded, the corners of her lips twitching into a small smile. She was ready. The trial had begun. Sam's mind raced through the facts of the case as she stood before the jury. Lucas's future was on the line, his life and freedom rested on her shoulders. She couldn't afford to mess this up. "Your Honor," she said, now fully immersed in the case, "let's take a moment to look at the evidence, or, more accurately, the lack of it." She pointed toward the projector screen, where a blurry image of a security camera feed was displayed. The prosecution had presented it as their key piece of evidence, showing Lucas near the scene of the alleged crime. The image was grainy, making it difficult to discern any details. Judge Thompson's eyes narrowed, clearly annoyed by Sam's tone. "Ms. Ford, you're not suggesting that our primary piece of evidence is flawed, are you?" Sam's pulse quickened. This was the moment she had been preparing for. This was where she would show them that she knew more than they realized. "I'm not suggesting, Your Honor," she said, her voice growing more confident. "I'm stating facts. This video isn't clear enough to be used as solid evidence. In fact, I can prove it's unreliable." A murmur ran through the courtroom as Sam presented her findings. She had spent hours analyzing the video, breaking down the pixels, comparing timestamps, and discovering discrepancies that no one else had noticed. It wasn't just about pointing out mistakes, it was about showing how the prosecution had failed to do their job thoroughly. The judge shifted in his seat, visibly uncomfortable now. He wasn't used to being challenged by someone so young, let alone a teenager who was dismantling his courtroom with facts and logic. But Sam wasn't done. She took a deep breath and continued. The video you're relying on doesn't show Lucas at all. It's a false lead. And I'm not here to waste anyone's time. The jury was paying attention now. Some were leaning forward in their seats, their skepticism beginning to shift. The judge glanced at the jury and then back at Sam, a flicker of something resembling respect in his eyes. But he quickly masked it with a scowl. "I'll allow you to continue, Ms. Ford," he said, his voice still tinged with doubt. "But you better have more than just this to prove your case." "I do," Sam said, with absolute certainty. "In fact, the real evidence is right here." She pulled out a series of documents, prepared in advance, witness testimonies, phone records, and a complete analysis of the crime scene that the prosecution had ignored. Sam had thought of everything. Her case was solid, and she wasn't about to let anyone laugh at her now. As the day's proceedings ended, Sam felt a wave of relief wash over her. She had done it, she had made it through the first round. But she knew that this was just the beginning. The real battle was still to come. Sam's best friend, Lucas, who had been sitting quietly in the back of the courtroom, stood up and walked over to her. His eyes were wide with disbelief. "Sam, I can't believe you did that. You were amazing." The judge, he actually backed off. "You proved him wrong." Sam smiled, but her mind was already racing ahead to the next phase of the case. "We're not done yet, Lucas. This is just the beginning." As she walked out of the courthouse, she couldn't shake the feeling that she had just opened a door to something much bigger than a simple case. She was going to show them all that age didn't matter. And she was just getting started. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Sam sat quietly in the back seat of the car, her fingers idly tracing the edge of a well-worn notebook. The day had been long, and the weight of what she had just accomplished was starting to sink in. But even as her mind raced with thoughts of the trial, she found herself reflecting on how far she had come. She had never been a typical teenager, not in the way her peers were. While other kids were out at parties or spending hours scrolling through their phones, Sam had spent her childhood in the cozy, quiet corners of her house, surrounded by books that her mother had carefully chosen for her. There was no room for distractions when you had a dream to chase. Her mother, Elena Ford, had always been the guiding force in her life. A single mom working multiple jobs to provide for Sam, Elena had instilled in her the values of hard work, perseverance, and most importantly, the belief that Sam could accomplish anything she set her mind to. Sam's memories of her childhood were filled with moments that seemed ordinary at the time but had shaped her in ways she was only starting to understand. Elena had often sat her down at the kitchen table, her tired eyes filled with determination, as they discussed topics far beyond Sam's years. They talked about justice, about the world, about the law. Elena would tell Sam stories about the cases she'd read in the papers, cases where the innocent were wronged and how the law was meant to protect those who had no voice. "Mom, do you think anyone can really make a difference?" Sam had asked one night when she was around 12, sitting at the table, watching her mother work on her bills after a long shift. Elena had paused for a moment, her hands still, before looking at Sam with a softness that only a mother could possess. "The world needs people who are willing to stand up for what's right. It's not about being famous or getting praise. It's about making sure the truth doesn't get buried." Sam had never forgotten that conversation. In her mother's words, she had found her purpose. The seed had been planted that night. Sam wanted to be a lawyer, not for the prestige or the money, but because she wanted to right the wrongs she saw in the world, just like the heroes in the books she devoured. But it wasn't always easy. Elena had tried her best to shield Sam from the harsh realities of their life. They lived in a small apartment, barely scraping by, and Sam was often the one to shoulder the weight of their struggles. She would make meals, help her mom sort through the bills, and take care of things at home, all while trying to maintain her studies. But there were days when the weight felt unbearable. At school, Sam wasn't always accepted. Her peers viewed her as the quiet, odd one, the girl who spent more time reading legal textbooks than gossiping about the latest trends. While most of the kids were out making memories at weekend hangouts, Sam was in her room, poring over case law, dissecting courtroom dramas, or practicing her arguments in front of the mirror. But Sam didn't mind. She had her mother's unwavering belief in her, and that was all she needed. Every time she felt lonely or out of place, she would remember her mother's words, "You are going to make a difference, Sam." "I know it." It was a cold winter evening, and Sam was in the kitchen, her mother at the table with a pile of law books spread out before her. She was studying for a paralegal exam, but Sam could tell her mind was elsewhere, her brow furrowed in concern. "Mom, you look stressed." "What's wrong?" Sam asked, pouring herself a glass of water. Elena sighed, rubbing her temples. "Oh, it's just another case I've been reading about. There's so much injustice in the world, Sam. Sometimes I wonder if we're doing enough to fix it." Sam sat down beside her mother, her young face serious for her age. "What do you mean?" Elena paused, choosing her words carefully. "I mean, there are people out there who can't afford the help they need. People like us, who get lost in the system because they don't have the right resources. I wish I could do more, but sometimes it feels like I'm just spinning my wheels, you know." Sam thought for a moment. "You're doing something. You're helping people every day, even if it doesn't feel like it." Elena smiled softly at her daughter, the exhaustion in her eyes replaced by a flicker of hope. "I want you to know something, Sam. If you ever feel like this world is too tough, too hard to change, remember that change starts with one person. And that one person, it can be you." Sam nodded, the weight of her mother's words sinking deep within her. She would make a difference. She would be the one to stand up for those who couldn't. Sam's thoughts drifted back to the present as the car turned the corner onto their street. The case. The trial. Everything she had worked for seemed so far away now, but in her heart, she knew that it was only the beginning. Her mother glanced over at her, a proud but concerned look on her face. "How did it go today, honey?" Elena asked, her voice soft but filled with care. Sam smiled, though her mind was still buzzing with the trial. "It went well, Mom. Really well. I think I surprised them." Elena's eyes sparkled, and she reached over to squeeze Sam's hand. "I always knew you would. You've got your father's fire in you, and my stubbornness. Together, there's nothing we can't do." Sam's smile faltered slightly at the mention of her father. She had never met him, he left before she was born, never looked back. But Sam had learned not to dwell on what could have been. She had Elena. And that was more than enough. "Thanks, Mom," Sam said quietly. "But I couldn't have done it without you. You've always been my biggest supporter." Elena chuckled softly, her eyes filled with love and warmth. "You've always had it in you, Sam. I just gave you the tools to find it." They pulled into their apartment complex, the building looking as small and modest as always, but to Sam, it was the place where everything began. It was where she had learned to dream big, despite the odds stacked against her. As they walked up to their apartment, Sam felt a sense of calm settle over her. The journey ahead was still long and uncertain. There were more cases to win, more people to help, and more battles to fight. But one thing was clear, she wasn't alone. Not anymore. She was ready to face whatever came next. After all, her mother had taught her well, change starts with one person. And Sam Ford was ready to be that person. The next morning, Sam woke up early, a sense of urgency already flooding her senses. She had just stepped into a world she only dreamed about, and she wasn't about to let it slip through her fingers. Her mother's encouragement echoed in her mind as she rushed to get ready. Today was a crucial day, the stakes were higher, and the pressure was real. Sam didn't have the luxury of time. She had a court session to prepare for, and there was still so much work to be done. Lucas's case wasn't over yet, and she had to build on what she had already accomplished. The image of Judge Thompson's skeptical expression during the first part of the trial lingered in her mind. He might have backed off a little, but Sam knew better than to think the battle was won. She glanced at the clock. It was almost 7 a.m. She had an hour before school, and Sam knew she'd have to squeeze every last minute of preparation in before her day officially began. As she made her way to the kitchen to grab a quick bite, she was met by Elena, who was already sitting at the table with a coffee mug in her hands. Her mom's weary eyes seemed to be studying Sam, as if she could sense the pressure mounting on her daughter. "Big day ahead?" Elena asked, taking a sip of her coffee. She had the same knowing smile that Sam had come to rely on. It was the smile that always made everything feel possible, even when everything seemed overwhelming. Sam nodded, pouring herself a glass of orange juice. "Yeah. There's a lot I need to do today. But I'll handle it." Elena looked at her, studying her face, and for a moment, Sam thought her mother might ask if she was feeling overwhelmed. Instead, Elena said, "You're going to do great. But remember, it's not just about winning, it's about standing firm in what you believe in. The truth is always on your side." "Thanks, Mom," Sam said, her voice quiet but filled with gratitude. She had heard those words countless times, but today they felt especially comforting. As Sam grabbed her backpack and headed out the door, she tried to quiet the nervous flutter in her chest. She wasn't sure what lay ahead, but she knew this was the moment where everything would either start to come together or fall apart. Sam walked into school feeling the weight of her new role. It wasn't just about juggling her studies anymore. She was standing in front of a jury, defending her best friend's future. She was trying to make a name for herself, not as a regular teenager, but as someone who could stand in the courtroom and take on the toughest of challenges. Her first class of the day was English, but instead of discussing Shakespeare or analyzing short stories, her mind was wrapped around legal arguments. She had an outline of the next steps in Lucas's case scribbled on the back of her notebook, and as the bell rang and students filed into the room, Sam couldn't help but feel that this place, the one where she once felt like an outsider, was now the least important part of her life. The chatter of her classmates buzzed in the background, but Sam's focus remained elsewhere. She noticed Grace, one of her classmates who had always been friendly, making her way over to Sam's desk. Grace was the kind of person who wore her heart on her sleeve, and she had always admired Sam's determination, even though they weren't exactly close friends. "Hey, Sam," Grace said, her voice soft but curious. "I saw you in court yesterday. You were amazing. I didn't know you were so into law. Is this all part of some project or?" Sam paused for a moment, unsure of how much to share. She wasn't one to brag about her accomplishments, but something about Grace's genuine interest made her feel comfortable. "It's not a project," Sam said quietly, glancing around to make sure no one was eavesdropping. "I'm actually representing my friend in a theft case. It's serious." Grace's eyes widened, clearly surprised. "Wait, seriously? You're representing someone in court at your age? That's incredible. You're like a real lawyer or something." Sam chuckled, feeling a bit of the tension in her shoulders ease. "I'm not there yet, but I'm learning. Every day is a new challenge." Grace nodded enthusiastically. "If anyone can win this case, it's you. Just make sure you don't let the pressure get to you. You've got this, Sam." Sam offered her a small smile, feeling a strange mixture of pride and disbelief. It wasn't that she didn't appreciate the support, but hearing Grace's words felt surreal. Sam was still the same girl who used to spend most of her lunch hours reading legal books in the library. She hadn't expected anyone to take her seriously, especially at school. But that was the moment when it hit her, the first sign that the world outside her immediate circle was starting to notice her. She wasn't just a girl with a big dream. She was someone people were starting to respect. Sam couldn't wait to get home after school. She was behind on her casework, and the pressure was starting to mount. She needed to finalize her arguments for the next day, but there was a problem. The prosecutor, Avery Carter, was no slouch. Avery had a reputation for being tough and meticulous in the courtroom. Sam had already begun to see the cracks in the prosecutor's case, but she knew Avery wouldn't let anything slide easily. This case wasn't going to be won by simply pointing out flaws in the evidence, it would require a lot more. When Sam finally reached home, she was met by the harsh reality that came with being her mother's only support. Elena had been working late again, and the apartment was eerily quiet. Sam tried to focus, but her mind kept drifting to Lucas. She knew that her argument was airtight, but she needed one final piece of crucial evidence to make the case rock solid. She was so close, yet, she could feel the stakes growing higher. Then came the phone call. It was Lucas, his voice filled with panic. "Sam, we have a problem. Avery, she's got a new witness. Someone who says they saw me at the scene. And they're gonna testify tomorrow." Sam's heart skipped a beat. She'd known this was coming. Avery Carter wasn't going to make it easy. "Don't worry, Lucas. We'll handle this. Just stick to the facts." But deep down, Sam felt the weight of the challenge. This new testimony could shift everything. The battle was far from over. In fact, it had just begun. The next morning, the air in the courtroom was thick with anticipation. Sam had arrived early, the rhythmic click of her shoes echoing in the otherwise silent hall as she walked through the courthouse. Her briefcase felt heavier today, not just with the weight of the papers inside but with the enormous responsibility she carried. Lucas's future was on the line. Sam's mind raced through her arguments as she entered the courtroom. The familiar clattering of heels on the polished floors, the soft murmurs of those waiting for their cases to be heard, it all felt surreal. A few months ago, this had been a world she only observed from a distance. Now, she was a part of it, standing at the front lines. She took her seat at the defense table, organizing her notes one last time, her heart pounding in her chest. Beside her, Lucas was nervously fidgeting with the collar of his shirt, his eyes darting around the room. He had trusted her to get him out of this mess, and Sam wasn't about to let him down. "You okay?" Sam whispered to him. Lucas glanced at her, his face a mix of worry and gratitude. "I'm nervous, Sam. What if they think I did it?" "They won't," Sam said, her voice firm despite the storm raging in her own mind. "We've got this. Just trust me." As they spoke, Avery Carter, the prosecutor, walked into the room, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. Avery was poised and confident, her dark suit a stark contrast to Sam's more casual attire. She was a formidable adversary, known for her no-nonsense attitude and razor-sharp focus. Sam had no illusions about this case, Avery wasn't going to back down easily. "Ready to lose?" Avery asked, her tone dripping with sarcasm as she flashed Sam a smug smile. Sam resisted the urge to respond with the same level of bravado. Instead, she remained calm and collected. "We'll see." Judge Thompson entered the courtroom, his stern expression settling over the room. "Order in the court," he bellowed, and everyone quickly rose to their feet. Sam stood as well, her nerves now settling into a determined focus. "Let's get started," Judge Thompson said as he took his seat. The trial began in its usual fashion, with both sides presenting their opening statements. Sam listened intently as Avery outlined the case against Lucas, painting him as the prime suspect. Avery's voice was steady, her arguments clear and concise. Sam could tell that she had been preparing for this moment for years. But then, just as Sam thought she had a moment to breathe, Avery dropped the bombshell. "I'd like to call our next witness," Avery announced, and the entire room fell into an expectant silence. The doors of the courtroom opened, and a tall, well-dressed man walked in. He looked confident, almost too confident, as he approached the witness stand. He was introduced as Jeffrey Turner, a businessman who claimed to have seen Lucas at the scene of the crime. Sam's heart sank. She hadn't expected this witness, and she certainly hadn't prepared for him. Jeffrey's testimony was as smooth as silk. He described the scene in vivid detail, insisting that he had seen Lucas near the store just minutes before the robbery occurred. According to him, Lucas had been acting suspiciously, as if he were casing the place. Sam's mind raced as she listened to Jeffrey's version of events. The details didn't add up with the timeline, but the way he presented himself, so calm, so assured, made it difficult to challenge his testimony on the spot. Avery's smile grew wider as she turned to Sam. "I'll let the defense have their chance to respond," she said, her voice dripping with confidence. Sam knew she had to act fast. Lucas's alibi was solid, but the new witness had put a huge dent in their case. She couldn't afford to lose her cool now. As the day wore on, Sam began to piece together the inconsistencies in Jeffrey's testimony. His details about the location of the crime scene didn't match the surveillance footage. There were gaps in his timeline that didn't line up with the physical evidence. But all of this was tucked away in her mind. She needed the right moment to strike. When it was her turn to cross-examine Jeffrey, Sam stood up, her legs slightly shaky but her determination unwavering. She approached the witness stand, her eyes never leaving Jeffrey's. "Mr. Turner," Sam began, her voice steady but filled with purpose. "You say you saw my client, Lucas, near the store just before the robbery. But I'd like to ask you about the specific details you provided." Jeffrey raised an eyebrow, clearly confident in his testimony. "Go ahead, but I know what I saw." Sam smiled slightly. "Let's talk about the timing. You claim Lucas was there around 8:10 p.m., correct?" "That's correct," Jeffrey replied. "But according to the surveillance footage from the store, there's no one matching Lucas's description anywhere near the store at that time. In fact, the footage shows a clear view of the entrance at 8:10 p.m., and my client is nowhere to be seen. How do you explain that?" Jeffrey's confident demeanor faltered for the briefest moment. He hesitated before replying, "Well, maybe the cameras missed something." "But we know they didn't," Sam interrupted. "In fact, the cameras picked up every single person who entered or exited the building that night. Including you, Mr. Turner." The courtroom grew still. Jeffrey's face turned a pale shade of pink, and Sam could see him beginning to sweat under the pressure. "Your testimony is flawed," Sam continued, her voice growing stronger. "You weren't even in the area at the time you claim to have seen Lucas. And what's more, the surveillance footage shows you entering the store just before 9 p.m., not before the robbery, as you claimed." For a moment, there was silence in the courtroom. The air felt thick with tension, and Sam could see the doubt creeping into the eyes of the jury. Jeffrey shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his confident facade beginning to crack. Judge Thompson leaned forward, his voice sharp. "Mr. Turner, do you have any explanation for these discrepancies?" Jeffrey stammered, his earlier composure evaporating. I must have gotten the time wrong, it was late, and..." Sam pressed on. "Mr. Turner, you may have gotten the time wrong, but your credibility has just been called into question. Are you sure that the testimony you've given today is entirely accurate?" Jeffrey was visibly sweating now, his hands gripping the edge of the witness stand. I might have been mistaken," he muttered, his voice barely audible. Avery, who had been sitting with a smug expression just moments earlier, now looked furious. But Sam didn't let up. She had the jury's attention now, and she wasn't about to let them forget what she had uncovered. As Sam finished her cross-examination, she could feel the tide turning. The doubt in Jeffrey's testimony had planted a seed in the jury's mind, and she knew it was only a matter of time before it took root. The rest of the trial proceeded, but Sam's confidence had been reignited. She might have been young, but she was sharp, and she knew how to listen, to the details, to the people, to the evidence. She wasn't going to let one false witness derail everything she'd worked for. And as she looked over at Lucas, his expression now one of cautious hope, she knew that this battle wasn't over. It was just beginning. The following morning, the air in the courtroom felt different. There was a palpable tension in the room, almost as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Sam had done everything in her power to expose the cracks in the prosecution's case, but now it was time for the jury to make their decision. Sam sat quietly at the defense table, her eyes focused on the empty chair across from her. Lucas was sitting beside her, still nervous but trying to maintain his composure. He kept glancing over at Sam, his gaze filled with gratitude and hope. Sam gave him a small smile, trying to offer reassurance, though inside, her heart was racing. The judge, Judge Thompson, entered the courtroom with his usual stern expression, and everyone rose. The proceedings began without delay. "Order in the court," Judge Thompson said, his voice echoing through the room. "We are now entering the final stage of this trial. Closing statements, starting with the prosecution." Sam's mind raced, replaying the previous day's events. The cross-examination of Jeffrey Turner had gone better than she could have hoped. He had wavered under pressure, his credibility shattered in front of the jury. But she knew better than to assume victory. Avery Carter would not go down without a fight. The prosecutor stood, her tall, imposing figure casting a shadow over the courtroom as she approached the podium. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Avery began, her voice smooth and authoritative. "We've heard from the defense today, but let's not forget what we know to be true. Lucas had the motive, the opportunity, and, according to the testimony of Mr. Turner, the presence at the scene of the crime. We cannot ignore that. This case is not about minor details or contradictions, it's about the facts. And the facts point to one conclusion: Lucas is guilty." Sam felt the weight of Avery's words pressing down on her, but she refused to let it show. Avery's argument was solid, but it was built on shaky ground. The witness had lied, and Sam knew the evidence was on her side. She had no doubt in her mind that Lucas was innocent. Avery finished her closing statement with a forceful glance toward Sam. "The evidence is clear. The truth is clear. It's time for justice." The prosecutor returned to her seat, and the tension in the room intensified. Now, it was Sam's turn. Sam stood up, her legs a little wobbly at first, but with each step toward the podium, she felt the weight of the room lift. She was ready. She had done her homework, and she was prepared to give everything she had for Lucas's sake. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Sam began, her voice calm but resolute, "I stand before you today not just as a teenager, but as someone who believes in the truth. The truth that my client, Lucas, is not the person the prosecution has painted him to be. The truth that this case is based on a series of misunderstandings and lies." She paused, glancing over at the jury. Their eyes were locked on her, waiting for her to speak. It wasn't lost on her how important this moment was. They were all expecting a defense from a seasoned attorney. But Sam was no ordinary teenager. She was a person who had worked tirelessly, night after night, to prepare for this day. And she wasn't going to let anyone down. Mr. Turner's testimony was the cornerstone of the prosecution's case, Sam continued, her voice gaining strength. But as I showed you, there were inconsistencies in his story. In fact, the evidence directly contradicts his statements. The surveillance footage from the scene does not show Lucas at the time Mr. Turner claimed to have seen him. The witness was mistaken, or worse, he lied. The room was silent as Sam's words echoed through the courtroom. "Let's talk about the facts," Sam said, her eyes sweeping across the jury. "The timeline the prosecution presented doesn't hold up. My client was nowhere near the scene when the robbery occurred. The physical evidence supports this. There is no connection between Lucas and the crime. And yet, the prosecution would have you believe that it's all a coincidence. That Lucas was in the wrong place at the wrong time. But coincidences don't add up when the facts don't fit. She could see Avery's expression tightening. The prosecutor was clearly growing frustrated, but Sam was on a roll. She couldn't back down now. Sam took another breath, then delivered the final blow. We're not here to argue over minor details. We're here to seek justice. And justice means looking at the whole picture. It means listening to the truth, not just to convenient lies. My client is innocent. And I ask you, the jury, to look at the facts with an open mind and return the only verdict that's possible, not guilty. The room fell into complete silence as Sam took her seat. She could feel the eyes of everyone on her, Lucas, Avery, Judge Thompson, even the jury, waiting for the next step. For what felt like an eternity, the jury retired to deliberate. Sam sat at the defense table, her hands clenched into fists, her mind racing. Had she done enough? Was her closing argument strong enough to sway them? Every minute that passed felt like an hour, and the tension in the room was palpable. Lucas, who had been silently watching Sam, finally spoke up. Sam, I don't know what to say. I don't know how to thank you for all this. You've done so much for me, and I just don't know how to repay you. Sam turned to him, her expression softening. You don't need to repay me, Lucas. I'm doing this because I believe in you. You're my friend, and that's what matters. Lucas nodded, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. I don't deserve this. I don't deserve you. Yes, you do, Sam said, her voice firm. You deserve a chance. And I'm going to make sure you get it. Finally, after what seemed like forever, the jury filed back into the courtroom. Sam's heart skipped a beat as the room fell silent once again. Judge Thompson looked at the jury with a steady gaze. Have you reached a verdict? The foreman of the jury stood, holding the piece of paper with the verdict written on it. He glanced at Lucas, then at Sam, before looking back at Judge Thompson. We have, Your Honor. Sam's breath hitched in her chest. This was it. The moment that would determine Lucas's future. The foreman turned toward the judge and announced, We, the jury, find the defendant, Lucas Wells, not guilty on all charges. The words hit Sam like a wave, and for a moment, the room felt like it was spinning. Not guilty. Lucas was free. She turned to Lucas, whose face had gone pale as the verdict was read. His eyes filled with disbelief as the reality of the situation sank in. The tears in his eyes were not of defeat, but of overwhelming relief. The courtroom erupted in a buzz of conversations and murmurs, but Sam's focus remained on Lucas. She had done it. She had won. The courthouse was filled with the low murmur of voices as people filed out of the room, some discussing the trial, others merely relieved it was over. Sam stood at the front of the courtroom, her legs feeling like jelly as she watched Lucas, who was still frozen in place. He couldn't quite believe the verdict. His entire life had been hanging in the balance just moments ago, and now, with a simple declaration of not guilty, everything had changed. But despite the victory, Sam couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the end of their journey. It was only the beginning. Lucas turned to her, his face a mixture of shock and awe. I can't believe it. I really can't believe it. Sam smiled, though there was a flicker of doubt behind her eyes. You don't have to believe it, Lucas. You're free. He nodded slowly, still processing everything. I can't thank you enough, Sam. You saved my life. You gave me a second chance. For a moment, Sam felt a warmth spread through her chest. She had done what she set out to do, she had proved his innocence. But now, the weight of the future hung over her like a cloud. Lucas had been through hell for weeks, living with the fear of being convicted for something he didn't do. Now that it was over, what would happen next for him? And for Sam? As they walked out of the courtroom, a reporter approached them, her camera crew in tow. Sam, how does it feel to win your first big case? Did you ever doubt the outcome? Sam paused, suddenly aware of the many eyes now on her. She wasn't used to being the center of attention, and the bright lights of the camera felt blinding. But there was no turning back now. She had stepped into this role, and there was no going back. I didn't doubt the outcome, Sam said, her voice steady. But I never did this for the recognition. I did it because I believed in Lucas. I believed in the truth. That's what matters. The reporter nodded, clearly impressed by Sam's poise. And what about you, Lucas? How does it feel to be free? Lucas smiled, his eyes gleaming with tears. It feels like I've been given a second chance at life. I don't know how to explain it, it's like a weight has been lifted off my shoulders. The interview continued for a few more minutes, but Sam's mind was elsewhere. She couldn't stop thinking about what Lucas had just said, a second chance. It was something Sam could relate to on a deep level. She'd been given a chance to prove herself, just like Lucas. The truth had triumphed, but both of them still had so much ahead of them. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. The media buzzed about Sam's unexpected triumph in the courtroom, with headlines calling her the teen who defended an innocent man and teen legal prodigy wins big case. Interviews and offers flooded her inbox, but Sam wasn't interested in fame or attention. She was just trying to keep things together, trying to figure out where her life was going next. Despite the attention, life at school resumed its normal pace. Lucas returned to his regular routine, though things had changed. No longer was he the boy everyone whispered about, he was now someone who had survived a trial, someone who had been proven innocent. People treated him with more respect, and Sam could see how the weight had been lifted from his shoulders. But for Sam, the feeling was different. She had done what many lawyers twice her age couldn't do, but she didn't feel the elation she thought would follow. Instead, she felt an overwhelming sense of uncertainty. Was this it? Was this the path she was meant to walk? Her phone buzzed, breaking her train of thought. It was a text from Avery, the prosecutor from the trial. Avery, I have to admit, I underestimated you. You've got a future ahead of you, Sam. Keep pushing forward. Sam stared at the message for a long time. Avery, the woman who had been her toughest adversary, was giving her a nod of approval. It felt strange, almost like a badge of honor. But Sam knew there was still so much she needed to learn. Her next text wasn't from a colleague or family member, though. It was from Dylan, the boy from school who had been by her side throughout the entire trial. Dylan, hey, I know things have been crazy, but you were amazing in the courtroom. You've got something special, Sam. I don't know what the future holds for you, but I know it's going to be big. Sam smiled to herself as she read the message. Dylan had been a steady presence in her life since the trial began, and his support meant more than words could say. But there was something else lingering in her mind, something that would change everything. Her next step. A few days later, Sam was in her room, still sorting through the pile of paperwork left from the trial, when her phone rang. The number wasn't one she recognized. Hello. Sam answered, unsure who would be calling her. Is this Sam McKinnon? The voice on the other end was authoritative but friendly. Yes, this is Sam. Who is this? This is Henry Grant from Grant & Associates law firm. We've been following your case with great interest, and we'd like to offer you an internship with our firm. Sam blinked, unsure if she had heard him correctly. Wait, what? An internship? Yes. We've been impressed by your work, especially in the Lucas Wells case. We think you have a lot of potential, and we want to offer you a chance to work with us. This could be the start of something great. Sam's heart skipped a beat. This was it. The opportunity she had been waiting for, the chance to take her legal skills to the next level. She had been doing it on her own so far, but now, she could work with seasoned professionals. This could be her stepping stone into a real career. I'm honored, Sam said, still processing the offer. But I'm still in school. How would this work? Henry's voice softened. We can work around your schedule, Sam. We believe in you. You're already ahead of the curve. This internship would give you real-world experience in the legal field, and I think you'd be a great fit. For a moment, Sam was speechless. This was everything she had dreamed of. The chance to learn from the best and shape her future in the legal world. Thank you, Sam said, finally finding her voice. I'd love to take the offer. I won't let you down. As the call ended, Sam sat back in her chair, her mind racing. She had just been offered an internship at one of the top law firms in the city. This was everything she had worked for, everything she had hoped for. It was her chance to step into the world of law as more than just a teenager with a passion for justice. It was her chance to shape her future. She glanced over at Lucas's message again, the words "second chance" echoing in her mind. They both had been given second chances. And now, it was time for Sam to take the next step in her journey. The first day of Sam's internship at Grant & Associates law firm arrived faster than she had expected. As the time to leave her house approached, the butterflies in her stomach grew stronger. She had been given an opportunity that many lawyers only dreamed of, but now it was time to prove that she truly deserved it. Her heart raced as she adjusted the collar of her shirt and checked her reflection in the mirror one last time. This was it, the moment her future was going to be shaped. She had prepared herself for everything, right down to how to greet her new colleagues and the proper legal jargon she might encounter. But nothing could truly prepare her for the reality of working in a prestigious law firm. Would they take her seriously? Would she belong here, among seasoned professionals with years of experience? When Sam arrived at Grant & Associates, the towering glass building felt both intimidating and awe-inspiring. The lobby was sleek and modern, with polished marble floors and walls adorned with framed awards and certificates. She took a deep breath before walking up to the receptionist's desk. "Hello," Sam said, her voice a bit shaky. "I'm Sam McKinnon. I'm here for the internship." The receptionist looked up from her computer, scanning Sam with an impassive expression. "Ah, yes. Sam McKinnon. You'll be working with Mr. Grant today. Please take the elevator to the 20th floor. He's expecting you." Sam nodded, feeling a little more at ease now that she had been directed to her destination. The elevator ride seemed like an eternity. When the doors opened on the 20th floor, she was greeted by a modern office space with glass-walled meeting rooms, sleek desks, and rows of bookshelves stocked with legal textbooks. A tall man in a sharp suit, Henry Grant himself, stood up as she entered, extending a hand. "Sam, it's a pleasure to meet you. I'm Henry Grant. I hope you're ready for an exciting journey," he said, his voice warm but commanding. Sam shook his hand firmly, determined to show that she was prepared. "I'm ready, Mr. Grant." Henry led her into his office, which overlooked the city skyline. The office was filled with bookshelves, awards, and legal case files, but there was a sense of comfort in the space. Despite the polished exterior, there was an air of familiarity here, a reminder that even the most prestigious law firms were made of people, not just suits and titles. "Let's get you situated," Henry said, gesturing to a desk in the corner of the room. "You'll be working with our team on various cases. I trust you're already familiar with how the legal system works, given your work on the Lucas Wells case." Sam nodded, eager to prove her worth. "Yes, I've been involved in a few cases, including a high-profile trial recently. I've been learning as much as I can." Henry raised an eyebrow, impressed. "Good. We'll put that to the test. But I expect you to be humble. There's always more to learn, no matter how experienced you are." "Understood?" "Absolutely, Mr. Grant. I'm here to learn," Sam replied. The first case that Sam was assigned to involved a complex business dispute between two rival companies over intellectual property rights. On the surface, it seemed like a typical corporate case, but as Sam reviewed the files, she quickly realized how complicated it was. Legal jargon she'd never encountered before filled the documents, terms like patent infringement, trade secrets, and arbitration. It was a far cry from the criminal case she had worked on with Lucas. Henry and his team were already deep into the case, and Sam quickly understood that the stakes were high. This wasn't just about money, it was about reputations, power, and influence. The potential for a public scandal loomed over the entire proceedings. Sam felt a sense of responsibility settle over her as she began to comprehend just how significant this case was. Over the next few days, Sam dove into research, tracking down precedents for intellectual property disputes, reviewing case law, and familiarizing herself with the technical details of the patents involved. She was thrown into the deep end right away, and though it felt overwhelming at times, she thrived under pressure. It was like solving a puzzle, each new detail brought her closer to understanding the bigger picture. Despite the excitement of learning and contributing to a high-stakes case, Sam couldn't help but feel a growing sense of insecurity. She wasn't like the other attorneys at the firm, she wasn't as experienced, and she still had so much to learn. There were moments during meetings when she felt out of place, especially when the senior attorneys discussed strategies or legal theory in terms that went over her head. One afternoon, as she sat in the conference room with Henry and his team, listening to them discuss the next steps in the case, she felt herself growing more and more self-conscious. She had a question, something about one of the technical aspects of the patent dispute, but she wasn't sure if it was appropriate to ask. The conversation was moving at a fast pace, and she didn't want to appear clueless. Henry noticed her hesitation. After the meeting wrapped up, he pulled her aside. "You have a question, Sam?" Sam hesitated before speaking. "I was just wondering, on the part about the trade secrets, I'm not entirely clear about how we can prove what was actually stolen. I mean, how do we prove something is a trade secret in court?" Henry smiled, a glint of admiration in his eyes. "That's a great question, Sam. It's something that many attorneys would gloss over. You're already thinking critically, and that's exactly what we need here. I'll walk you through it." The conversation that followed helped Sam better understand the nuances of intellectual property law and how trade secrets were treated under the law. Henry's willingness to explain things to her reassured Sam. Maybe she wasn't as out of place as she had feared. She had a long way to go, but she was learning, and that was the most important thing. As the weeks passed, Sam settled into her role at Grant & Associates. She wasn't just an intern anymore, she was part of the team. Henry continued to mentor her, providing guidance and challenging her to think critically about each case. The other lawyers were initially skeptical of her youth, but they quickly recognized her sharp mind and determination. She wasn't just a teenager, they began to see her as a colleague, someone who had a future in law. One evening, as Sam worked late on a case file, Dylan sent her a text. "Dylan, how's the first month of the internship going? Are they keeping you buried in paperwork?" Sam smiled at the message, happy to know someone cared about her outside of the firm. "Sam, it's intense, but I'm learning so much. I'm starting to feel like I actually belong here." "Dylan, of course you do. You're a genius. It's just a matter of time before they see it too." Sam's fingers hovered over the screen as she reread his message. She wasn't used to receiving such praise, but the words meant more than she realized. It wasn't just about the cases or the victories, it was about the people who believed in her, who saw potential when others might have overlooked her. As Sam sat back in her chair, looking out at the city skyline, she felt a new sense of purpose. She had taken the first step into a career she was passionate about, and though the path ahead was uncertain, she knew she was on the right track. Her journey was just beginning, and no matter how difficult the road ahead might be, she was ready to face it head-on. The next few weeks passed by in a blur for Sam. The internship at Grant & Associates was everything she had hoped for and more. The cases were challenging, the work demanding, and the atmosphere in the office, although professional, was also surprisingly supportive. Henry Grant had taken her under his wing, guiding her through complex legal strategies and introducing her to some of the firm's most important clients. But despite all the progress, Sam felt an undercurrent of tension building within her. It wasn't just the intensity of the work or the weight of the cases she was involved in, it was the feeling that something big was coming, something that would push her to the very limits of her capabilities. She could feel it in the air, a shift. And she was ready for it. At least, she thought she was. It started with a simple email. "Sam, I'd like you to take a look at this case," Henry said, his voice calm but laced with purpose. "We've just taken on a new client, and they need our help. It's a corporate fraud case, and it's going to get ugly. I need you to go through the documents and start building the case strategy." Sam sat up straighter, her heart skipping a beat. A corporate fraud case. This was the kind of case that would put her skills to the test. She'd been hoping for something that would challenge her, that would make her push beyond her comfort zone. And now it was here. As Sam opened the files on her computer, she immediately understood why Henry had assigned her to this case. It was messy, complicated, and filled with twists. The company at the center of the fraud allegations was a massive tech giant, with billions of dollars in assets and a reputation that could easily be destroyed if the allegations were proven true. The stakes were high, and Sam realized that this case could define her career, one way or another. Her task was to sift through mountains of financial documents, emails, and contracts to identify any discrepancies or fraudulent activity. It was grueling work, her eyes started to blur from hours spent staring at spreadsheets, but she didn't mind. She was fully immersed in it, determined to uncover something that could change the course of the trial. And then, after days of tedious work, she found it. A series of encrypted emails between the CEO of the company and a group of executives. At first glance, they appeared to be about routine business dealings, but after decoding the encryption, Sam found evidence of illicit transactions, large sums of money being funneled into shell companies, strange payments linked to bribes, and hidden accounts designed to cover up the fraudulent activities. Sam's pulse quickened as she realized the magnitude of what she had uncovered. This wasn't just a minor mistake or an oversight, it was corporate fraud on a massive scale. And she had the proof. Sam couldn't contain her excitement as she rushed to Henry's office to share her discovery. But as she walked through the door, she stopped in her tracks. Henry was on the phone, speaking in low, urgent tones. His face was tense, his brow furrowed in concentration. When he noticed Sam standing there, he gestured for her to wait. "I'll call you back," he said to the person on the other end, hanging up the phone. "What's going on, Sam?" "I found something," Sam said, her voice shaky with a mixture of excitement and uncertainty. "I think I found the smoking gun. The emails, between the CEO and the executives, they're encrypted, but I was able to decode them. There's evidence of fraud. A lot of it." Henry's expression didn't change immediately. He leaned back in his chair, his eyes narrowing as he processed what Sam had said. Then, without warning, he stood up and walked to the window, staring out at the city below. "I'm glad you found this, Sam," he said quietly. "But I need you to understand something. This case, it's dangerous. Not just for the company, but for us too. If we go public with this evidence, it could ruin reputations, livelihoods, and potentially cause a scandal that could hurt a lot of innocent people." Sam was taken aback. "But this is fraud. People are being taken advantage of. The company is guilty." "I know," Henry said, his voice heavy. "But the truth isn't always black and white. There are consequences to exposing something like this. You need to think about whether you're ready for that kind of responsibility." Sam stood there, frozen. Was she ready? The truth was right in front of her, undeniable. But Henry's words weighed heavily on her mind. She had wanted to make a difference, to stand up for what was right, but was she prepared to face the fallout of exposing a corporation this powerful? For the next few days, Sam wrestled with the decision. She spent late nights reviewing the case documents, considering the consequences of both revealing and concealing the fraud. She spoke to Dylan, who had been a constant support throughout her journey, but his advice didn't make things any easier. "Dylan, you've always wanted to make a difference, Sam. This is your chance. If you don't expose the truth now, you might never get another opportunity like this." But on the other hand, Henry's warning echoed in her mind. Was she prepared for the backlash? For the powerful enemies she would make if she took this to court? Finally, Sam came to a decision. The truth had to come out. She wasn't going to let fear stand in the way of doing what was right. She would present the evidence to Henry, and together, they would decide how to move forward. But there was no turning back now. She had already taken the first step by uncovering the fraud, and she wasn't about to let it slip away. The following morning, Sam walked into Henry's office with the evidence in hand. Her palms were sweaty, and her heart raced, but she was determined to see this through. "Henry," she said, sitting down across from him, "I've made my decision. I'm ready to take this case public. We have to expose the fraud. It's too big to ignore." Henry studied her for a moment before nodding slowly. "You're sure about this?" Sam nodded. "I'm sure." Henry's eyes softened, and for the first time, she saw a flicker of something else in his gaze: pride. "You've got guts, Sam. I'll give you that," he said. "But we're in this together. We'll make the decision when the time is right." Sam felt a surge of relief. She wasn't alone in this fight. And with Henry's guidance, she knew they could take on whatever came next. As the days passed, Sam's role in the case deepened. She began working closely with Henry and the team to prepare the evidence, carefully weighing the risks and the potential rewards of their actions. This wasn't just about winning the case, it was about standing up for justice and holding those in power accountable for their actions. And with every step, Sam felt herself growing. The teenager who had walked into the firm weeks ago, unsure of her place, had evolved into a confident, determined young woman ready to fight for what was right. There was still much to be done. But Sam knew one thing for sure: this was just the beginning of her journey, and she was ready for whatever came next. After making her decision, Sam felt a renewed sense of purpose. She had chosen to pursue justice, no matter the personal cost. But as the days wore on, she began to understand just how complex and challenging that decision would be. The corporate fraud case was far from straightforward. There were layers of deception, layers of people involved, and powerful forces that had worked tirelessly to hide the truth. As Sam delved deeper into the evidence, she felt herself increasingly weighed down by the responsibility of what she was about to unleash. The company at the heart of the case wasn't just any ordinary corporation, it was one of the biggest tech giants in the world, with deep ties to influential politicians, financial institutions, and media companies. Exposing their wrongdoings meant going up against an entire industry, and that's where the danger lay. It wasn't just about winning the case anymore. It was about what would happen once the truth came to light. Would the system support them? Would they have the resources to back them up? More importantly, would Sam be prepared for the inevitable backlash? But despite the growing pressure, one thing remained clear: she wasn't going to back down. Her commitment to the truth outweighed her fear of the consequences. It was early morning when Henry called Sam into his office. His tone was serious, and Sam could sense that something big was about to happen. "Sam, I need you to listen carefully," Henry said, motioning for her to sit. "We're about to enter a very sensitive phase of this case. It's time to decide how we're going to move forward. I've been in this business long enough to know that things are never as simple as they seem. We need a strategy." Sam nodded, her heart racing. She had been preparing for this moment, preparing to take the next step in exposing the fraud. But she hadn't expected the weight of the decision to feel so heavy. Henry continued, "This company, TechCorp, is well connected. They've got high-powered attorneys, and they're not afraid to use their resources to crush anyone who stands in their way. If we're going to win this case, we need to be strategic, calculated. It's not just about what we know, it's about how we present it. Sam leaned forward, listening intently. What do you want me to do? We need to gather more than just the emails, Henry said, his eyes narrowing. Those emails are important, but they're not enough to convict TechCorp. We need a full, comprehensive case, a case that no one can ignore. You're going to have to dig deeper. Get your hands dirty if necessary. The words, "get your hands dirty," echoed in Sam's mind. She wasn't sure exactly what Henry meant, but she understood one thing: it was time to push boundaries. Sam threw herself into the task. She spent every waking hour combing through thousands of documents, chasing down witnesses, and consulting with experts. She was relentless. The more she uncovered, the more convinced she became that exposing the fraud was the only option. Every new discovery, every shady business transaction, every false report, only fueled her resolve. She was determined to connect all the dots and build a case so airtight that no one could dispute it. But the deeper she dug, the more dangerous things became. One afternoon, while reviewing financial statements, Sam found a troubling pattern. Several offshore accounts had been created to launder the illicit funds. But something wasn't adding up. The transactions were carefully masked, hidden under layers of corporate jargon and legalese, making it nearly impossible to track the money trail. Whoever set this up is good, Sam muttered to herself, her fingers flying over the keyboard as she dug deeper into the accounts. The complexity of the fraud made it clear that this wasn't just a few rogue employees, they had a whole network of people behind them. Sam's thoughts were interrupted when she received a call from Dylan. "Hey, Sam. How's the case going?" he asked, his voice light, but she could tell he was worried. "It's complicated," Sam replied. "I found some serious stuff that could bring TechCorp down. But the deeper I go, the more dangerous it gets. I feel like I'm being watched." Dylan was silent for a moment. "Do you think someone's onto you?" "I don't know," Sam admitted. "But I feel like someone's pulling the strings, trying to cover their tracks. It's like they're trying to erase any trace of what's going on. Be careful, okay? I'm here if you need me." Sam appreciated Dylan's concern, but she wasn't about to stop now. She was in too deep. The next day, Sam received an unexpected visit. It was a man in a dark suit, wearing sunglasses, standing outside the law firm's entrance. He had the look of someone who didn't belong in the building, but Sam could sense that he wasn't just anyone. He was there for a reason. When she walked past him, he glanced at her, his eyes narrowing for a split second before he turned away. Sam's heart skipped a beat. Something about him made her uneasy. It wasn't just the fact that he looked out of place, it was the way he had looked at her. It felt as if he knew who she was. Or at least, he knew what she was doing. She rushed up to Henry's office and told him about the encounter. Henry's face grew serious. "That's not a good sign. It could mean they're onto you. TechCorp's hired private investigators before to intimidate witnesses and employees. Be cautious, Sam." The realization hit her hard. She wasn't just uncovering fraud anymore. She was being targeted. In the following days, Sam began to feel the weight of the situation pressing down on her. She had already risked so much by uncovering the evidence, but now she was facing a new, more personal threat. Her safety, her career, and the future of the case were all at risk. Would she continue to push forward, knowing the danger she was putting herself in? Or would she pull back, reconsidering the consequences of exposing such powerful enemies? As Sam sat at her desk late one night, staring at the evidence she had gathered, she knew there was no turning back. She couldn't let fear control her. The truth had to come out, no matter what. Her phone buzzed, and she saw a message from Dylan. "Dylan, I'm proud of you, Sam. You're doing the right thing. Just remember, you're not alone." The message gave her the strength she needed. She wasn't alone in this fight. Henry was with her. The team was with her. And more than anything, Sam was with herself. The days blurred together as Sam's world became consumed by the complexity of the case. The walls of the office felt like they were closing in on her, but she refused to let fear take over. She had committed herself to exposing the fraud, and she wasn't about to back down. In the quiet hours of the night, while most of the firm's employees were gone, Sam worked tirelessly. She knew that the deeper she dug, the more dangerous it would get, but that only motivated her further. Every piece of evidence she uncovered felt like a victory, but it also raised more questions. She had stumbled upon a web of deceit that stretched far beyond what she had initially imagined. It all began when Sam discovered a hidden set of files in TechCorp's internal records, files that had been intentionally obscured by a complicated set of encryption codes. Most people would have given up at that point, but Sam was no ordinary teenager. She had a natural knack for puzzles, and she had spent enough time deciphering clues in her life to know that this was just another challenge. After hours of work, she finally cracked the code. What she found was both astonishing and terrifying: a list of executives who were involved in money laundering, bribery, and an illegal investment scheme that had been going on for years. Each name on the list was tied to multiple offshore accounts, real estate deals, and shell companies. Some of the transactions dated back to the early days of TechCorp's rise to power. Sam couldn't believe what she was looking at. The fraud was far more extensive than anyone had realized, and the number of people involved made it clear that this wasn't just a few bad apples. This was a coordinated, organized effort to cheat the system. Her heart pounded as she reviewed the information. The enormity of it was almost overwhelming. If she presented this to Henry, it would change everything. This was the smoking gun they needed. But as she looked at the files, a sense of unease settled over her. These were dangerous people she was going up against, people who had no qualms about going to extreme lengths to protect their empire. Just as Sam was about to head to Henry's office, her phone buzzed with a notification. It was a message from Dylan. "Dylan, Sam, I've been hearing some things. People are talking. Be careful. I don't know if you've noticed, but you're being watched." Sam's blood ran cold. She hadn't told Dylan about the stranger she'd seen outside the firm's building a few days ago. How could he know? But as she thought about it, she realized that he wasn't just guessing. Dylan had always been sharp, he'd always had a way of sensing when something wasn't right. Her hand shook as she set the phone down and stared at the new evidence in front of her. She had to make a decision. She couldn't continue to dig without fully understanding the risk it posed to her and those around her. She had already come this far. Now, she was at a crossroads. Sam made her way to Henry's office. She had all the evidence she needed, more than enough to bring TechCorp to its knees. But there was still one crucial question that remained unanswered: was she ready to take this public? And if she did, would she be able to protect herself and those she cared about? When Sam entered Henry's office, he looked up from his desk and raised an eyebrow. "Sam, I assume you've made a breakthrough?" She nodded, placing the folder of documents on the desk. "I found everything: names, accounts, the whole network. This goes all the way to the top." Henry didn't immediately respond. Instead, he ran his fingers through his hair, deep in thought. Finally, he sighed. "I knew it was big, but I didn't expect this," he said quietly. "We've been sitting on a powder keg this whole time, Sam. Exposing this, if we go public, it could destroy TechCorp. But it could also destroy us. These people don't play by the rules. If we go after them, they'll fight back in ways you can't even imagine." Sam swallowed hard. She had expected Henry to say something along those lines, but hearing it from him made the danger feel all the more real. "I'm not backing down," Sam said, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her insides. "I'm ready to take them down." Henry looked at her for a long moment, as if weighing her words. Then, with a small nod, he said, "All right. But you need to understand one thing. Once this goes public, there's no turning back. We'll have targets on our backs. We have to be strategic in how we move forward. You're going to need backup. For the next few days, Sam and Henry worked closely together to prepare the evidence. They knew they couldn't just drop the bomb all at once, they needed a plan. The strategy was clear: they would begin by reaching out to investigative journalists, leveraging the media to bring attention to the case. They would present the evidence in a way that would make it impossible for TechCorp to deny. But there was one more thing they needed: a whistleblower. Sam's heart raced as she sat across from Henry. We need someone inside the company. Someone who can speak out about what's been happening. I agree, Henry said. But finding someone willing to risk it all isn't easy. And we can't trust anyone connected to the company right now. Sam thought for a moment. What about an ex-employee? Someone who left because of what was going on? Henry nodded thoughtfully. That's a good angle. I'll reach out to a few contacts I have. We need someone who can confirm what we found. As they worked, the urgency of the situation began to settle in. Time was running out. They had to move quickly before TechCorp caught wind of what they were planning. The longer they waited, the more likely it was that the company's lawyers would begin covering their tracks, destroying evidence, or intimidating potential witnesses. The next morning, Henry called Sam into his office again, his expression grim. I've got a lead on a former employee, he said. Someone who worked in TechCorp's internal audit department. They might be able to confirm everything we've found. But it's going to be risky. If they're caught talking to us, they could be facing serious consequences. Sam felt a chill run down her spine. This was real. The danger wasn't just theoretical anymore, it was right in front of them. But she knew that they couldn't do this without the whistleblower's help. We can't back out now, Sam said, her voice firm. We've come this far. We have to see it through. Henry gave her a long look before nodding. You're right. But remember, once we go down this path, there's no turning back. As they continued to build their case, Sam felt the weight of the decision she had made pressing down on her. Every piece of evidence they gathered was a step closer to exposing the truth, but every step also brought them closer to the line they could never cross back over. The endgame was in sight, but Sam couldn't help but wonder, what would be left once they revealed everything? Would the world finally see TechCorp for what it was? Or would the power of the company, and the people behind it, be too strong to defeat? One thing was for sure, Sam wasn't going to stop until the truth came out. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? As Sam sat at her desk, flipping through the mountain of evidence that had been painstakingly gathered, a sense of determination overtook the creeping doubts. She had already decided that she wasn't going to stop, but now the reality of what they were doing started to settle in. TechCorp wasn't just any company. It was a global giant with the power to destroy careers, lives, and reputations. Exposing them wasn't just a matter of unveiling the truth, it was about risking everything they had to make the world a better place. Henry's call had come in the morning, the details both exciting and terrifying. The whistleblower was real, someone willing to speak out against the corruption at TechCorp. The ex-employee had agreed to meet them, but the meeting would come with risks. This wasn't a conversation that could be held in the open. It had to be discreet, private, and above all, safe. Sam wasn't sure what to expect. She had imagined this moment countless times, but nothing had prepared her for the reality. This was no longer a theoretical game of strategy. Lives were on the line. That evening, Henry and Sam made their way to a small, unassuming cafe tucked away in a quiet corner of the city. They had arranged to meet the whistleblower there, hoping that the public location would help with anonymity. They sat at a table in the back, trying to look like any other pair of business partners discussing a project. But every moment felt like it could be the start of something much bigger, or the end of everything they had worked for. After a few tense minutes, the door to the cafe opened, and a man in his mid-30s walked in. He had dark hair, sharp eyes, and a nervous energy about him. His suit was well tailored, but there was something about him that screamed, out of place. He scanned the room quickly, then made his way over to their table. "Mr. Monroe?" the man asked in a low voice, looking at Henry. "That's me," Henry replied, offering a small, cautious smile. "And this is Sam, the one I told you about. Thanks for meeting us." The man nodded, his hands shaking slightly as he took a seat. "I know this is risky," he said quietly, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. "But I couldn't stand by and do nothing anymore. I've seen enough." "Tell us what you know," Sam said, leaning forward. Her heart pounded, but she remained calm, her mind racing as she thought about all the potential information they were about to receive. The man sighed, rubbing his hands together. "I worked in TechCorp's internal audit department for years. I thought it was a good company when I first joined, innovative, cutting edge, a place where I could make a difference. But as I moved up, I started noticing discrepancies. Small things at first, transactions that didn't add up, financial reports that were adjusted at the last minute. I brushed it off at first. Maybe it was a mistake, I thought. But then, I saw the pattern. It was intentional. They were cooking the books, hiding billions of dollars in fake transactions. TechCorp wasn't just making money, they were stealing it. From their investors, from their customers, and even from their employees." Sam's mind raced as he spoke. She had known the fraud was extensive, but hearing it confirmed by someone who had been inside was chilling. She glanced at Henry, who was listening intently, his face grim. "I started documenting everything," the man continued, his voice tight with emotion. "I couldn't just let it happen. But the higher up I went, the more dangerous it became. I knew I had to leave before I became part of their machine. But when I did, they started making threats. They said if I talked, they'd ruin me. I'd never work again. My family, they wouldn't be safe." Sam felt a pang of sympathy for him, but her resolve didn't falter. She knew that what they were doing could put them all in danger, but she also knew that if they didn't act, the corruption would continue unchecked. "What do you want from us?" Henry asked, his voice steady but full of urgency. "I don't want anything for myself," the man replied. "I want you to expose them. I have documents, files that show everything. But they're locked away, encrypted. I can't give them to you just like that. If I'm caught with them, it's over. You need to help me decrypt them, get the evidence out before TechCorp realizes what I've done." Sam's breath caught in her throat. This was the moment they had been waiting for, but it was also the most dangerous. If they failed, the consequences would be dire. The next few days were a whirlwind of planning. Sam, Henry, and the whistleblower, who introduced himself as Robert, met in secret, each new meeting drawing them closer to the heart of the conspiracy. Robert handed over the encrypted files, and Sam wasted no time getting to work, using every ounce of her technical skill to crack the codes. As she worked late into the night, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. TechCorp was too powerful, too well connected for them to remain under the radar for long. Even as she sat in the safety of her office, surrounded by files and the glow of her computer screen, Sam felt the pressure of the world on her shoulders. If they were discovered, everything would be lost. The case, the evidence, their safety, everything. At times, Sam questioned whether they were doing the right thing. Would the truth really set things right? Or would they only be exposing themselves to the very forces they were trying to fight? But in her heart, she knew that there was no turning back now. The truth had to come out. It was late one night when Sam finally cracked the encryption. Her fingers flew over the keyboard as the last lock fell away. The files that appeared on her screen were everything they had hoped for, and more. There were financial reports, internal memos, and even personal emails between key executives detailing the steps they had taken to manipulate the market, hide illicit transactions, and evade the law. But there was one document that stood out above the rest. It was a contract, signed by several top executives, including the CEO of TechCorp. It was a formal agreement outlining the illegal activities they had engaged in over the years, including bribes to politicians, money laundering schemes, and a plan to deceive investors on a global scale. "This is it," Sam whispered, her voice barely audible as she looked over the documents. This was the smoking gun they had been searching for. With this, they could bring down TechCorp for good. But as she stared at the files, a voice in her mind reminded her of the risks. Exposing these documents would be a battle, one they might not win. The fight against such powerful adversaries was never simple, and the fallout could be disastrous. Yet, despite the fear gnawing at her, Sam knew one thing: they had no choice. The world needed to see the truth. The decision was made. The evidence was irrefutable, and the stakes had never been higher. Sam sat back in her chair, staring at the document on her screen. It was the kind of evidence that could topple a corporate empire. TechCorp had been getting away with millions, maybe billions, in illegal activities for years, and now, she held the key to bringing them down. But with that key came a burden, a responsibility to protect the truth and expose the corruption without getting crushed by it. As she reviewed the files one last time, Sam's phone buzzed. She quickly checked the message. It was from Henry. "Henry, we need to move fast. I've got a contact lined up for the press. But we need to be careful. TechCorp's already onto something." Her stomach twisted. She had been working around the clock for days, piecing everything together, but now, it was time to act. They couldn't afford any mistakes. The world was about to find out what TechCorp had been hiding, but the question was, would they be ready for the fallout? Later that afternoon, Sam and Henry made their way to an undisclosed location, where they were set to meet with an investigative journalist named Carla Reynolds. Carla had been a key player in exposing several high-profile corporate scandals over the past decade. If anyone could handle the weight of the story, it was her. But even Carla seemed wary, knowing the magnitude of what they were about to undertake. They met in a small, dimly lit conference room at a local coffee shop, far from any prying eyes. The room was barely furnished, with only a few chairs around a small table. It had the feel of a place where secrets were meant to be shared. Carla was already sitting at the table when they arrived, her sharp eyes studying them both. She was in her 40s, with short, dark hair, and wore a professional but slightly disheveled look, like someone who had seen too much and was used to playing by her own rules. "So," Carla said, leaning forward, her voice low but direct, "I hear you've got something big. TechCorp, huh? You really want to take them down? Because once this gets out, there's no going back." Sam swallowed hard but nodded. "We have the evidence. Everything. And we need your help to make sure the world sees it." Carla looked at Henry. "I trust you, but I need to see the proof. You can't expect me to just take your word for it." Henry opened his briefcase and pulled out a stack of documents. He handed them to Carla, who immediately began flipping through the pages. Sam watched her carefully, trying to gauge her reaction. Carla's face remained impassive as she scanned the files, but Sam could see the flicker of recognition in her eyes when she reached the section that detailed the money laundering scheme. "You've got a gold mine here," Carla said finally, looking up at them. "This isn't just a corporate scandal. This is criminal, on an international scale. TechCorp is going to fight back hard. They'll do whatever it takes to discredit you, to shut you down." "We know," Henry replied. "That's why we need to move quickly. We've already been working with Robert, a former employee who's willing to testify. But we can't do this alone." Carla nodded. "I can help you get the story out, but you need to be prepared for what's coming. The media is going to want blood, and TechCorp will make sure you're the ones who look guilty if they can." Sam felt a wave of anxiety wash over her. Carla was right. The higher they climbed, the bigger the target they would become. TechCorp had the resources, the connections, and the legal firepower to bury anyone who crossed them. But Sam's resolve didn't waver. She had made it this far. She couldn't back down now. "We're ready," Sam said, her voice steady. "We have no choice." The next few days were a blur. Sam, Henry, and Carla worked together to get the story ready for publication. They arranged for multiple media outlets to cover the expose, each one focusing on different aspects of the corruption, financial fraud, human rights violations, environmental damage, and the countless illegal activities that had been going on behind closed doors. But with every step closer to the launch, the tension mounted. The closer they got to exposing TechCorp, the more Sam felt the weight of the decision pressing down on her. She had never anticipated this kind of fallout. The company had friends in high places. They had power, influence, and money. And now, she was about to put herself in their crosshairs. Despite the pressure, Sam kept her focus. She had a team of people who believed in her. Henry, Robert, Carla, each of them was playing a crucial role in bringing TechCorp to justice. It was no longer just about the money or the corruption. It was about standing up for what was right, no matter the cost. Then, the call came. Sam was sitting in her office, going over the final details with Henry, when her phone buzzed. It was an unlisted number, and something about the call made her heart skip a beat. "Hello," she answered cautiously. "Sam. It's Carla. Listen, we've got a problem. TechCorp's legal team is moving faster than we anticipated. They've already started pressuring some of the media outlets. There's a chance they'll try to block the story before it even goes live." Sam's blood ran cold. "What do you mean, block the story?" "They've threatened to sue the publications, accusing them of defamation," Carla explained. "And they've already started digging into your background, Sam. They know who you are." Sam's mind raced. This was the moment they had feared, the moment they were most vulnerable. TechCorp wasn't just going to let this slide. They would fight back, and they would fight dirty. "We have to push forward," Sam said, her voice firm. "We can't let them stop us now. We've come too far." Henry stood up, pacing the room. "We need to get ahead of them. The longer we wait, the more ammunition they'll have. We need to release the story now, before they can spin it." Sam nodded. She could feel the fear gnawing at her, but she knew there was no other option. This was it. The tipping point. The moment they either brought TechCorp down or let them get away with everything. Sam sat at her desk, staring at the blinking cursor on her screen. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, but no words came. The weight of everything that had happened, and everything that was about to happen, hung heavy in the air. The call from Carla had shaken her. TechCorp wasn't going to sit back and let this expose go public. The battle was just beginning, and now the stakes were higher than ever. She glanced at Henry, who was pacing back and forth across the room. The tension in his face mirrored her own, but his mind was already racing, thinking of their next move. It wasn't just the press that they had to worry about anymore, it was everything. The media war, the legal tactics TechCorp would unleash, and the constant threat of retaliation. But it wasn't just them at risk anymore. Robert had already put his job, and his life, on the line to come forward. He was just as vulnerable now as they were. "What if they come after us directly?" Sam asked, breaking the silence. "What if we can't stop them from shutting us down?" Henry stopped pacing and met her gaze. "They'll try. They've got money, power, and lawyers who can bend the law. But we have something they don't, truth. And we've got the press behind us. Carla's right, they'll try to block the story, but the media's already starting to get wind of it. We're not alone in this fight." Sam nodded, but a cold shiver ran down her spine. She knew Henry was right, but the more they moved forward, the more she realized just how much she stood to lose. She had always been a fighter, but now, this felt like a war, and wars always had casualties. That evening, as Sam was heading home, her phone rang. It was an unknown number, and despite her better judgment, she answered it. "Hello?" she said cautiously. A voice on the other end was low, almost too calm. "Miss Hartley, you don't know me, but I know you. I think it's time we had a little chat about what you're trying to do to TechCorp." Her heart stopped. It was a threatening tone, one that made it clear that whoever this was had no intention of negotiating. This wasn't about offering a settlement or making a deal. This was about sending a message. "I don't know what you're talking about," Sam replied, her voice steady despite the panic rising in her chest. "Don't play coy with me," the voice said, a faint laugh echoing in the background. "We know what you've been up to, and we know about your little whistleblower friend, Robert. You might think you're doing something noble, but the truth is, you're making a huge mistake. If you want to avoid more trouble than you can handle, I suggest you drop everything. Walk away. And leave TechCorp to do what it does best. Or else." The line went dead. Sam stood frozen, her heart hammering in her chest. This wasn't a warning. It was a promise. Someone was watching them, closely, and TechCorp wasn't afraid to use intimidation to protect its empire. She took a deep breath and dialed Henry's number, her hands trembling. "Henry," she said as soon as he answered. "We've got a problem." The next few days were a blur of frantic action. Sam and Henry worked with Carla to prepare the final draft of the expose. Every word had to be perfect, every detail had to be checked. TechCorp would be looking for any mistake, any discrepancy, that could give them an opening to discredit everything. They were ready to launch the story, but every move felt like they were walking on a razor's edge. Robert had gone into hiding, afraid of being targeted by TechCorp's ruthless legal team. His testimony was crucial, but he wasn't willing to risk his life, or his family's, by being out in the open. "Do you think we're ready for this?" Sam asked Henry one night as they sat in the office, reviewing the final draft of the article. Henry met her gaze. "There's no perfect time for something like this. If we wait too long, they'll find a way to stop us. This is the moment. We've come this far. We can't back down now." Sam nodded, though doubt still lingered in the pit of her stomach. But she knew Henry was right. They had no choice. Once the story was out, it would be out of their hands. It wasn't supposed to happen this way, but sometimes the unexpected has a way of rushing in when you least expect it. A few hours before they were set to release the story to the world, a leak appeared. Sam was scrolling through her emails when her phone buzzed with an alert from Carla. "Carla, this just hit the wire, someone got a hold of the documents early. The news is already breaking. You need to prepare for what's coming." Sam's stomach dropped. This wasn't the plan. They had worked so hard to keep everything under wraps until the right moment. But now, someone had gotten their hands on the evidence, someone with enough power to release it without their consent. Sam quickly opened the news app on her phone, and there it was. The headlines screamed at her: TechCorp's corruption uncovered, financial scandal reaches global proportions. The story was out. Her heart raced as she read through the article. It was everything they had worked for, but now it was out in the open. The media frenzy was about to begin, and with it came the inevitable backlash. No sooner had the article gone live than the storm began. TechCorp's legal team filed multiple lawsuits, accusing Sam, Henry, and their sources of defamation and libel. Press conferences were held, with TechCorp's PR team scrambling to spin the narrative in their favor. They denied the allegations, calling them unfounded and malicious, while accusing the media of spreading misinformation. But the story wasn't going to be buried that easily. While TechCorp tried to silence them through the courts, other media outlets began picking up the story. The pressure mounted. In less than 24 hours, TechCorp stock prices began to plummet, and executives scrambled to find a way to stop the bleeding. For Sam and Henry, this was both a victory and a warning. They had cracked the shell of TechCorp's empire, and now the cracks were widening. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Sam and Henry remained in the public eye, but with each passing day, the danger grew. Threats against their lives became more frequent. They changed their phone numbers, increased security, and kept a low profile, but there was always a sense of being hunted. TechCorp wasn't going down without a fight. And as the pressure mounted, Sam couldn't help but wonder how far she was willing to go. Would she risk everything for the truth? Or would the price of bringing down a giant be too high? In the back of her mind, she could already hear the voice of that mysterious caller. The warning they had given her was clear, and it was only a matter of time before it came true. The months following the release of the expose felt like a series of unrelenting waves crashing against Sam's life. Every victory they scored, every inch they gained in the fight against TechCorp, seemed to come at a higher price. They were constantly on the run, forced to keep their movements hidden. The media attention was relentless, and with it came the shadow of danger that hung over Sam, Henry, and everyone who had been involved in the story. The phone calls continued, each one more threatening than the last. TechCorp's lawyers were as aggressive as they were powerful, and the public relations campaign they unleashed was like a flood of misinformation meant to discredit everything Sam and Henry had worked for. Despite the pressure, Sam couldn't back down. There were moments, especially at night when she lay awake staring at the ceiling, that she thought about what would happen if they just let it go, if they ran, disappeared, and lived their lives free of this enormous burden. But deep down, Sam knew that wasn't an option. She had seen the truth, and now the world had to see it too. But the question loomed, how long could they keep fighting before they were crushed beneath the weight of the fight? Things took a darker turn when Sam received the call about Robert. "Sam, it's Carla," her voice was tight, almost breaking. "They found him." Sam's stomach dropped. Robert had been their key witness, the one person who could bring down the heart of TechCorp's corruption. He'd been lying low ever since he'd come forward, and they had promised to protect him. But now, it seemed, someone had broken that promise. "Where is he?" Sam's voice was a low whisper, barely able to hold the panic that threatened to surface. "Right now, he's in the hospital. He's alive, but he's been attacked. Beaten badly. We think they're trying to send a message." Sam felt the blood drain from her face. This was worse than just threats. This was an escalation, a direct attack on someone who had dared to stand up against the giant that was TechCorp. The danger was real now, and it wasn't just theoretical. People were being hurt. Sam had to make a choice. Could she keep going when they were coming for the people she cared about? The attack on Robert changed everything. It wasn't just about exposing the truth anymore, it was about survival. TechCorp had made it personal. Sam immediately called Henry. "We need to move. Now." "What do you mean?" he asked, confusion lacing his voice. "I mean, we can't just sit here and wait for them to come after us next. We need to get ahead of them. We need to take the fight to them." Henry's silence on the other end of the line felt heavy. He was thinking, processing, calculating. "We need to take this to the next level," Sam continued, her voice shaking but determined. "We're going to release more. We have more evidence, more documents, stuff they haven't seen. We hit them hard. We bring the fight to the public. They'll never see it coming." Henry's voice came through, resolute. "All right. Let's do it. But we have to be careful. They've already shown they're willing to do whatever it takes to shut us down." Sam knew the risks. But she couldn't let them win. Not after everything that had happened. Not after Robert had been attacked. The clock was ticking, and it was time to take a stand. That night, Sam sat at her laptop, typing furiously. Her fingers moved with purpose as she put together the final pieces of the evidence, emails, financial records, testimonies, everything that would take down TechCorp once and for all. It wasn't just about the corporate corruption anymore. This was about proving that TechCorp had taken everything too far, that their greed had endangered the lives of innocent people. She glanced at the clock. It was 2 a.m. Henry was in the other room, coordinating with Carla and the journalists who had agreed to help them break the story to the world. It was all coming together. Just as she was about to hit send on the final article, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Carla. "Carla, they're on to us. Get out. Now." The hair on the back of Sam's neck stood up. She had felt it coming, but seeing the words in front of her sent a chill through her bones. They had been exposed. TechCorp had discovered their next move. She grabbed her bag and rushed to the door, barely taking the time to glance at the screen before she followed Henry out of the apartment. They were no longer in control of the situation. Now, it was about survival. By the time they reached the safe house, a dingy, anonymous location arranged by Carla, the adrenaline had set in. The whole world was watching, but Sam felt like she was in a haze. She had no idea what would happen next. They were about to release the final set of evidence that would not only implicate TechCorp in countless crimes but would expose the very heart of its operations. The world would know everything. But would it be enough? Sitting in the dimly lit room, Sam and Henry went over the plan one last time. They had to make sure they were ready. There were no second chances. "We've done everything we can," Henry said, his voice tired but resolute. "Once we go public with this, there's no going back. We have to be ready for the fallout." Sam nodded, her mind whirling. She thought about Robert, about what had happened to him, and realized that there was no going back. She couldn't let them win. Not now. Not after everything. "I'm ready," Sam said, though her heart pounded in her chest. It didn't matter how scared she was. She wasn't backing down. The next morning, the story broke. It was everywhere, on TV, in newspapers, and across social media. The evidence Sam and Henry had uncovered was now out in the open for the world to see. The true extent of TechCorp's corruption was laid bare for everyone to witness. The reactions were immediate. The public outrage was swift, and the media coverage was overwhelming. As expected, TechCorp's legal team scrambled to contain the damage, but it was too late. The genie was out of the bottle. But it wasn't just about TechCorp's downfall. It was about something more. It was about what Sam had learned over the course of this journey, the importance of fighting for the truth, even when the stakes were too high. The world had seen the truth, and it was no longer in the hands of a corporation that had controlled everything for so long. The aftermath of the reveal hit harder than Sam had expected. It wasn't just the whirlwind of media coverage and public outrage that consumed the world, it was the immediate consequences that were starting to unfold right before her eyes. TechCorp, shaken to its core by the exposure, was fighting back with everything it had. Lawyers, damage control teams, and even shadowy figures in the corporate world were scrambling to contain the fallout. Sam and Henry kept a low profile in the days following the story's release, but it was impossible to escape the repercussions. The first was a direct hit. TechCorp's lawyers served them with a barrage of lawsuits, accusing them of everything from defamation to fraud. The legal pressure mounted quickly, and Sam knew that it was only a matter of time before things escalated further. But as she scrolled through the headlines, something caught her attention: TechCorp CEO resigns amid scandal. Her heart skipped a beat. It was happening faster than she had anticipated. People were being forced to fall on their swords to protect the company's interests. But it wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The media frenzy was relentless. News anchors dissected every detail of the expose, while social media was filled with debates, hashtags, and viral memes. On one hand, Sam felt a strange sense of vindication. The world was finally seeing the truth. The injustice of TechCorp's actions was being laid bare. On the other hand, she couldn't shake the feeling that the battle was just beginning. A week after the story broke, Sam received a message from Carla. "Carla, I just spoke with a few people. The board of directors is in chaos. They're scrambling to cover up what they can, but there's no stopping this now. You've done more than you realize." Sam read the message multiple times, feeling the weight of those words. More than she realized. Was there more to this than just the collapse of TechCorp? Did we make a mistake? She asked Henry that night as they sat in the dimly lit room at their safe house. The tension had settled into their bones, the exhaustion visible in their eyes. Henry shook his head. We didn't make a mistake. We did the right thing. But it's not over. The real fight's just begun. As the days went by, it became clear that the consequences of their actions were not just legal, they were personal. Sam received an anonymous letter at her doorstep one morning, its words chilling her to the core. You've made your move. Now we'll make ours. It wasn't just the letter that unnerved her. It was the realization that someone was actively watching her, waiting for the right moment to strike. Who do you think this is from? She asked Henry, her hands trembling slightly as she showed him the letter. It's TechCorp, he said grimly. They're sending a message. They'll do whatever it takes to make us back down. Sam felt a knot tighten in her stomach. The pressure was mounting. She'd known they'd face retaliation, but the personal threats made it real. Too real. We can't stop now, she said firmly, staring down at the letter. We're too deep in. We can't let them intimidate us. Henry nodded in agreement, but Sam could see the worry in his eyes. They had crossed a point of no return. It wasn't just their fight anymore. It was everyone's. In the midst of this chaos, a new opportunity emerged. Carla, who had been working tirelessly behind the scenes to support their cause, arranged a meeting with an unlikely ally, an investigative journalist named Natalie Hayes. Natalie had a reputation for breaking some of the biggest corporate corruption scandals in history, and now, she was turning her attention to TechCorp. I've been following your story, Natalie said as she sat down with Sam and Henry at their safe house. What you've uncovered is massive. But there's more to the story. There are other corporations just like TechCorp, ones with their fingers in every pie, and they're all linked. What you've started is just the tip of the iceberg. Sam was taken aback. She hadn't expected this conversation to go in that direction. She thought the fight with TechCorp was the goal. But Natalie was suggesting that this could be something bigger, a movement. You want to take down more than just one corporation? Sam asked, her voice filled with uncertainty. Exactly, Natalie said, leaning forward. What you've started is a revolution. The public is waking up to the corruption that's been allowed to run rampant for years. We can make this global. We can expose it all. For a brief moment, Sam felt a glimmer of hope. This wasn't just about her, Henry, and Robert anymore. This was about something larger, a fight that could change the course of history. By now, the public had begun to react with overwhelming support for Sam and Henry's crusade. Everywhere they went, people recognized them. Journalists reached out for interviews, social media influencers shared their story, and public opinion was on their side. The tide was turning. But the more support they gained, the more the threats from TechCorp became serious. One evening, as Sam was walking to her car, a black SUV pulled up beside her. A window rolled down, and a man in a suit stared at her with cold, calculating eyes. Ms. Hartley, he said, his voice like ice. You don't know what you're getting yourself into. You think you've won, but trust me, you haven't. We'll make sure you regret this. The car sped away before she could respond, and Sam felt a cold shiver run down her spine. The threats had escalated. They were no longer just an annoyance. Now, they were a direct warning. Sam and Henry spent the next few days preparing for the inevitable. They couldn't stay hidden forever. They had to continue their fight, but they knew the risks were growing with each passing day. TechCorp was cornered, and when cornered, the most dangerous corporations became the most ruthless. But even with the looming threats, Sam couldn't help but feel a sense of urgency. She had to keep going. She had to make sure that the truth was known, not just for herself, but for everyone who had suffered because of TechCorp's greed. She couldn't back down now. Are you sure about this? Henry asked one night, his voice filled with concern. Sam looked out the window, the lights of the city blurring in the distance. "We've come too far to stop now," she said, her voice steady despite the fear that lingered in her chest. "This is bigger than us. We have to see it through." And so, they did. The fight wasn't over. It was only just beginning. Days passed in a haze of constant vigilance, and Sam felt the weight of what they had started pressing heavily on her shoulders. The world was changing in response to their actions, but so was the danger surrounding them. Every corner held a new threat, every phone call could be a trap, and every decision they made carried the weight of possible consequences. Sam spent her nights staring at the city skyline, her thoughts in turmoil. She had always dreamed of a day when justice would prevail, but now that it was happening, the harsh reality of their fight set in. What was she truly up against? The truth was, they were challenging an empire, a ruthless corporate machine that had no intention of going down without a fight. And it was clear that TechCorp wasn't just targeting Sam and Henry anymore. They were targeting everyone who dared to take a stand. "Are we making a difference, Henry?" Sam asked one evening, her voice tinged with doubt as she sat at the table, sorting through the mountains of documents they had uncovered. The papers seemed endless, filled with corporate secrets and hidden deals, but it all felt so intangible. Henry, who had been scanning the news, glanced over at her. His face was drawn, his usual optimism shadowed by the weight of their situation. "I think we are. It's just hard to see it sometimes. But we can't lose sight of why we're doing this. There are people out there who are depending on us to keep pushing." It was the truth. Their cause had become bigger than just them. The movement they had ignited had spread far beyond their immediate circle. The public was beginning to understand just how deep the corruption ran, and tech companies were being held accountable in ways they never had been before. But even in the face of mounting support, there was always that looming feeling of danger. Each news cycle brought with it new threats, anonymous messages, strange cars trailing their every move, and quiet whispers from friends who had grown too scared to stay involved. Sam's phone buzzed, snapping her out of her thoughts. It was another message from Carla. "Carla, we've got a problem. It's bigger than we thought. TechCorp has a new CEO. I don't think you're ready for what's coming." Sam's heart skipped. A new CEO? After all that had happened, the tech giant was pulling in someone fresh, someone to take the helm and salvage their reputation. "Who is it?" Sam typed back quickly, but the response came almost immediately. "Carla, his name is Victor Stokes. He's ruthless. He's a corporate shark with a history of burying people like us." Sam stared at the message, her fingers still hovering over the keyboard. This was bad, worse than she thought. Victor Stokes wasn't just another corporate leader. He had a reputation for silencing anyone who stood in his way. People had disappeared under his watch, and many suspected that his methods were far from legal. Henry looked over her shoulder, reading the message as well. "So they're sending in the big guns," he said, his voice low. "This just got a lot more dangerous." Sam nodded slowly. The calm they had experienced in the last few days had been nothing more than the eye of the storm. The real battle was just beginning. With the arrival of Victor Stokes at the helm of TechCorp, the pace of their efforts to expose the company had to accelerate. It wasn't just about finding more evidence anymore, it was about preparing for an all-out war. The first sign that things were taking a darker turn came when they received a chilling message on their website's contact form: "We know where you live." It wasn't a generic threat. This one was personalized. And it wasn't just sent to Sam and Henry, it was also directed at everyone who had been involved in their crusade, including Robert, who had been recovering from the attack. The message was a reminder that TechCorp had its claws everywhere. They weren't playing around anymore. Sam felt the weight of the threat. This was no longer a simple fight for justice, it was survival. And every move had to be calculated. She couldn't afford to make a mistake. But the pressure wasn't just from the threats. It was the constant reminder of what was at stake. TechCorp had the power to destroy lives, and they were willing to do whatever it took to protect their empire. As the days went on, Sam and Henry worked with their allies to formulate a plan. They weren't going to back down. But they had to be smart. TechCorp's legal team was now working overtime, filing injunctions, and threatening lawsuits at every turn. The court seemed to be leaning in favor of the corporation, and with each legal defeat, the walls around them seemed to be closing in. But Sam didn't back down. Instead, she leaned into the strategy that had worked so far: transparency. They would continue to expose TechCorp. They would show the world what the company had been hiding for years. They would push back harder than they ever had before. The next breakthrough came when Natalie Hayes reached out again. She had some startling news. Victor Stokes wasn't just interested in salvaging TechCorp's reputation. He had a hidden agenda, one that went far beyond business. "He's planning something big, Sam," Natalie said, her voice filled with urgency. "I've been digging into his background, and I think I've found something. He's been working with some very powerful people, government officials, lobbyists, and investors who are backing him. TechCorp's troubles were never just about the company. It was about him positioning himself for something bigger." "What kind of something?" Sam asked, already dreading the answer. "It's bigger than we thought," Natalie replied. "I think TechCorp is just a stepping stone for a much larger operation. There's a massive deal in the works, something that could change the entire global tech landscape. And it's all tied to these backdoor deals he's been making." Sam's heart raced. This wasn't just about exposing corporate corruption. This was about preventing a power grab that could affect the entire world. "Do you have the proof?" Sam asked, her voice hardening. "I'm working on it," Natalie said. "But I need time. If we're going to stop him, we have to act fast." Sam's mind raced. They were up against a ticking clock. TechCorp wasn't just fighting to save face, they were preparing to become an even more dangerous force in the world. And Sam realized that the stakes had just gotten much higher. Over the following days, the situation became increasingly volatile. With Stokes at the helm, TechCorp unleashed a full-scale campaign to discredit Sam, Henry, and everyone involved in the expose. Fake news articles, doctored photos, and even social media bots were mobilized to paint them as criminals, not heroes. But no matter what TechCorp threw at them, the public continued to rally around Sam and Henry. People were waking up to the fact that they had been lied to for years, and no amount of misinformation could change that. In the midst of all this, the threats became more personal. One evening, Sam returned to her apartment to find her door wide open. There were no signs of forced entry, but it was clear someone had been inside. Her computer was missing, along with several of the key files they had been working on. It was a warning. It was a long, tense week after the break-in. Sam couldn't shake the feeling that they were being cornered, that everything they had worked for was slowly being erased. The missing files, the stolen computer, the constant surveillance, it was clear that TechCorp wasn't just playing defense anymore. They were going on the offensive, and Sam had become their primary target. The threats had escalated. More anonymous calls. More cryptic messages. But it wasn't just the danger to her life that concerned Sam. It was the toll it was taking on everyone around her. Henry was on edge, his usual calm demeanor replaced with an intensity that made her nervous. Robert, though still recovering from his injuries, had become more involved, contributing ideas and strategies to protect their cause. And even Carla, who had always been a rock of support, now seemed to be operating under constant stress. It wasn't just about fighting TechCorp anymore, it was about survival. But the fight had to continue. The stakes were too high. Sam's resolve only hardened as each day passed. She refused to let fear dictate their actions. There was a war to win, and they were already too deep in to turn back. As the pressure mounted, Sam received a call that could change everything. It was Natalie Hayes, the investigative journalist who had been working tirelessly behind the scenes. I've got something, Natalie said, her voice strained with urgency. I've found the missing link. The one thing that can bring TechCorp down for good. Sam sat up straighter, her pulse quickening. What is it? A secret partnership, Natalie continued. Stokes didn't just take over TechCorp. He's been working with an international conglomerate, one that controls nearly half of the world's tech infrastructure. This partnership has been kept under wraps, and it's worth billions. But there's something even bigger. This conglomerate has been using their influence to manipulate governments, data privacy laws, and global markets. They've been doing it for years, Sam. Sam's mind raced. If this was true, it wasn't just a corporate scandal, it was a global crisis. Do you have proof? I've got documents, emails, and even an internal memo. It's all here, but I can't access it from my current location. They've been tracking my every move. We need to meet in person, Sam. It's too dangerous to send over encrypted channels. I'll meet you at the usual place. Sam's heart pounded. This was the break they needed. The kind of evidence that could topple TechCorp, and possibly everyone connected to it. We'll be there, Sam said, her voice determined. Later that night, Sam and Henry arrived at the remote cafe where they had agreed to meet Natalie. The place was quiet, nestled in a forgotten corner of the city. They were taking every precaution, no phones, no direct communication outside of their small circle. The world outside was a dangerous place, and every interaction felt like a risk. Natalie was already waiting for them when they arrived, her face pale under the dim lights. She wasted no time getting straight to the point. I've got the evidence, she said, sliding a thick envelope across the table to Sam. Everything you need to bring down Stokes and his partners. Sam's hands shook as she opened the envelope. Inside were pages of documents, contracts, and bank statements that painted a clear picture of the international conspiracy TechCorp was involved in. Names, dates, figures, all the pieces of the puzzle that had been hidden for so long. This is it, Henry said, his voice filled with awe. This could bring them down. Sam nodded. It's more than that. This could change everything. But before they could discuss the next steps, a chilling sound cut through the room. The faint buzz of a phone vibrating on the table. Sam looked up, her heart dropping into her stomach. It was her phone, vibrating in her bag. She glanced at Henry, who immediately tensed. Something was wrong. A look of recognition flashed across Natalie's face. Get out of here. Now. Sam didn't hesitate. She grabbed the envelope, shoved it into her bag, and stood up, motioning for Henry to follow. They bolted for the door, the sense of urgency thick in the air. But before they could make it out of the cafe, the door swung open with a loud bang. A group of men in suits stormed in, their eyes scanning the room like hawks. Sam and Henry dashed into the night, the sound of heavy footsteps following close behind. They didn't have a plan. There was no time. All that mattered was getting out of sight, staying one step ahead. They ran through the narrow alleyways, weaving between parked cars and trash bins, their hearts pounding in their chests. The city was dark, but the glow of streetlights illuminated their path, giving them just enough visibility to keep moving. Sam's mind was racing. The documents. The evidence. It was all in her bag. If they lost it, everything they had worked for would be lost in an instant. They turned a corner, but as Sam glanced back, she saw a black SUV screech to a halt at the end of the street. It was a trap. They had to make a decision. We need to split up, Sam said quickly. I'll take the back route. You head down Main Street. Henry hesitated, his eyes searching hers. Are you sure? They'll be looking for you. I'll be fine, she said, trying to sound confident, though her own fear was threatening to break through. Just go. I'll meet you later. Without another word, Henry darted down the street, disappearing into the shadows. Sam took a deep breath, turning to face the alley behind her. It was narrow, winding, and dark, but it offered the best chance to lose her pursuers. She moved quickly, her footsteps echoing in the silence. The city felt like a maze now, each turn a possible dead end, every shadow a potential hiding spot. But just as she reached a junction, a voice rang out from behind her. "There she is." It was too late to turn back. She ran faster, pushing her legs to their limits. The sound of footsteps grew louder, the men closing in. Sam's pulse thundered in her ears. She couldn't stop. Not now. She had the truth with her, the proof that could bring TechCorp and Stokes to their knees. They couldn't take that away from her. As she rounded the next corner, a door appeared on her left. Without thinking, she shoved it open and slipped inside, heart racing. Sam held her breath as she slipped through the door, closing it quietly behind her. The faint sound of heavy boots echoed outside the alley, growing fainter as the pursuers moved past her hiding spot. She leaned against the wall, her body trembling from the adrenaline coursing through her veins. The night air was cold, and she could feel the dampness of sweat on the back of her neck. She had made it out, at least for now. She took a moment to steady herself. The small, dimly lit room she had entered appeared to be a storage area, with old crates and discarded furniture strewn around. The only source of light was a flickering bulb overhead. Sam's heart continued to race, but she knew she couldn't afford to stay here long. The men outside would eventually realize she wasn't just hiding in a dead-end alley, they would come looking for her in the building. She had to move. Her phone buzzed again, and Sam quickly pulled it out, praying it wasn't a message from TechCorp's hired goons. It was a text from Henry. "Henry, I lost them, but we need to meet. Where are you?" Sam exhaled, relieved to see it was Henry. Her fingers hovered over the screen, but before she could reply, a new message appeared on her phone. "Carla, they've started moving on the documents. We don't have much time. Get out of there." Carla's words hit Sam like a punch to the gut. If TechCorp had already started acting on the documents Natalie had sent her, they were running out of time. The very thing that could bring the corporation down, everything they had worked for, was now at risk. She could hear the clock ticking in her head, urging her to act. Sam quickly composed herself. There was no time to waste. She had to get back to Henry, to safety, and fast. Her mind raced through possible escape routes, but the building she was in wasn't familiar to her. She carefully approached the exit, peeking through a crack in the door to assess the situation. The street outside was clear, no sign of the men chasing her. She took a deep breath and stepped out of the room, moving with purpose as she carefully navigated through the building. Every creak of the floorboards underfoot seemed amplified in the tense silence. She moved quickly but quietly, trying to stay out of sight, knowing that at any moment, someone could be right around the corner. Finally, she reached the back door of the building. It opened to a narrow alleyway leading toward the main road. Sam glanced over her shoulder before stepping into the night, but there was no sign of danger. She wasn't out of the woods yet, but for the moment, she was safe. Sam pulled up the map on her phone and looked for the quickest way to meet Henry. They needed to get to a safe house, a place far from TechCorp's reach, where they could lay low and plan their next move. As she tapped the map, she noticed a flashing notification from one of their encrypted channels. Message from Natalie: "I don't know how much longer I can stay out of their grasp. They're closing in on me. If I go down, all the information will be lost. You need to act now." Sam's stomach twisted with anxiety. If they didn't act quickly, they would lose everything. She couldn't let that happen. Sam made her way toward the meeting point she and Henry had agreed on, a small coffee shop just off the main street. It was a place they frequented during the quieter days of their mission, before the threats had escalated and their lives had become one long run from danger. But now, even a place like this felt unsafe. As she approached, Sam scanned the area, looking for any sign of Henry. There was no time to waste. TechCorp's efforts were ramping up, and everything was on the line now. She stepped inside the coffee shop, glancing around. It was nearly empty, save for a few patrons hunched over their laptops, oblivious to the danger lurking in the shadows. Sam's eyes immediately locked on Henry, who sat in a corner booth, his face tense and focused. He stood as soon as he saw her. "Sam, are you okay? What happened?" His voice was a mix of concern and urgency. Sam didn't answer immediately. Instead, she slid into the booth, her mind racing with everything they had to do. "We don't have much time. Natalie's in trouble. TechCorp is closing in on her, and they've started moving on the documents. If we don't act fast, it will all be gone." Henry nodded grimly. "I know. We need to take the information straight to the public. Expose them before they can destroy the evidence." Sam's heart pounded. "But the risks are higher than ever. If we release this without backup, it could be twisted against us. We need to make sure this is foolproof. We need allies. People with influence who can protect us." Henry's brow furrowed as he processed her words. "You're right. We need a plan, and we need it fast." As if on cue, Sam's phone buzzed again. This time, it was an unexpected message, one that caught her off guard. "Carla, I've got someone who can help. It's risky, but we need all the help we can get. Meet me at the usual spot." Sam glanced at Henry, who raised an eyebrow. "Who's this?" Sam's lips pressed together in a thin line. "Someone from our past. Someone who might be able to get us the protection we need. I don't know if we can trust them, but right now, we don't have many options." Henry sighed but nodded. "Then we don't waste time. Let's go." The usual spot was an old abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town, a place that had once been a temporary hideout for them. Now, it felt like the last place they should go. But it was their only option. When they arrived, Carla was already waiting outside, her face tense. Beside her stood a man Sam didn't recognize. He was tall, with dark hair and a hard, calculating look in his eyes. He didn't seem like the type of person to make small talk. "This is Gavin," Carla introduced, her voice low. "He's an investor, and more importantly, he has connections in the highest levels of government and tech. If we want to get out of this alive, we'll need his help." Sam eyed Gavin cautiously. "What exactly are you offering us?" Gavin stepped forward, his gaze steady. "I can give you the protection you need. The kind of protection that will make TechCorp think twice before coming after you. But I'll need something in return." Sam crossed her arms. "What's the catch?" "I'll help you expose TechCorp and bring them down," Gavin said, his voice cold. "But in exchange, I want a seat at the table when the dust settles. I want to help shape the future after all of this is over. You can't fight this battle alone. You'll need allies in places that can protect you, and that's where I come in." Sam exchanged a look with Henry. This wasn't exactly what they had in mind, but it was an offer they couldn't afford to refuse. After a long pause, Sam nodded. "Fine. We'll work together. But don't think for a second that we're trusting you completely." Gavin smirked. "Fair enough. But remember, you'll need me to win." The air was thick with tension. The deal was made, and now they had to trust Gavin, something Sam wasn't entirely comfortable with, but time was running out. The documents, the secret deals, and the very future of their fight against TechCorp rested in their hands. And Gavin, despite his cold exterior, was their only hope for getting this information into the right hands, and for staying alive. The following morning, Sam, Henry, Carla, and Gavin met in a discreet office in a nondescript building downtown. They couldn't afford to be tracked, and this location was just obscure enough to avoid detection. The stakes had never been higher. Gavin wasn't wasting any time. He immediately got down to business, laying out a plan that was both ambitious and risky. "We've got one shot at this," Gavin said, his voice steady and calm. We need to leverage every connection I have, hit every influential person in the government and the media. The documents are solid. The corruption runs deep. We can expose them, but we need to make sure TechCorp's grip is already slipping before we do. Sam felt a surge of nervous energy. And if they get to us first? We won't let them, Gavin replied with a cold smirk. I've arranged protection. You'll be under my radar now. No one will touch you. Carla exchanged a glance with Sam. There was something unsettling about Gavin's confidence. While it was reassuring to know they had someone on their side with resources, the reality of relying on a man they hardly knew was a different matter. But with the situation growing direr by the hour, they didn't have the luxury of hesitation. We need to be sure that when we go public, the story hits hard, Henry said, his voice laced with determination. It has to be undeniable. Gavin nodded. That's why we're going big. We don't just go to the press, we go to the biggest names. We're talking primetime news, government hearings, and every social media platform. If we can break this open all at once, TechCorp won't know what hit them. Sam wasn't sure if she was ready for the world to see just how deep the rabbit hole went. But there was no turning back. She nodded. Let's do it. Within hours, Gavin had mobilized his network. His contacts in the media and political sphere had already been briefed, and everything was set. The key players in the media were ready to run with the story as soon as they received the materials. The documents, the emails, the evidence, they were all being compiled into a single exposé that would rock the foundations of TechCorp. As Gavin and the team worked on finalizing the release, Sam couldn't shake the feeling of impending doom. The pressure to succeed was overwhelming. If they didn't act now, the evidence might be buried forever. If they didn't get it into the right hands, TechCorp would find a way to discredit it or, worse, destroy it altogether. There were still many unknowns. Would the public believe the scale of the corruption? Would the government step in to protect them, or would they bow to the corporate giant? Sam tried not to think too much about those questions, but they weighed heavily on her. Stay focused, Carla said, sensing Sam's unease. We've come this far. We can't let fear stop us now. Sam nodded, taking a deep breath. The hardest part was yet to come. Just as things seemed to be falling into place, the unexpected happened. Sam's phone buzzed, a sudden alert breaking through the tension. She glanced at the screen and froze. It was a message from Robert, the team's trusted ally who had been quietly working behind the scenes. Robert, Sam, I need to talk. Something's not right. I think Gavin's been playing both sides. The message hit Sam like a ton of bricks. Her stomach turned. She stared at the phone screen for a long moment, her mind racing. Henry noticed her silence. What's wrong? Sam showed him the message. Robert thinks Gavin might not be on our side. He thinks Gavin's been playing both sides. Henry's expression darkened. If that's true, then everything we've worked for, everything we've trusted, is about to implode. Carla stepped forward. We can't take any chances. We need to confront Gavin, now. Sam's pulse quickened. But what if Robert's wrong? What if this is just paranoia? Henry shook his head. We've got to be sure. We can't afford to gamble with our lives. Sam felt torn. They had made such progress. They were so close to exposing TechCorp. But if Gavin really was playing both sides, it meant they were walking right into a trap. The decision was made. They couldn't take any more risks. Sam, Henry, and Carla confronted Gavin in the office where they had been strategizing. He was sitting behind the desk, looking at the final version of the exposé. Gavin, Sam began, her voice firm, we need answers. Robert thinks you've been playing us. That you've been working both sides. Gavin didn't flinch. Instead, he looked up at them with an almost amused expression. Is that so? Answer the question, Henry demanded, his voice sharp. For a moment, Gavin didn't speak. He leaned back in his chair, his hands folded in front of him. Finally, he broke the silence. "You're right. I have been playing both sides." Sam felt a sickening jolt in her stomach. Everything they had built, everything they had trusted, was unraveling before her eyes. "But not for the reasons you think," Gavin continued, his voice taking on a darker tone. "I've been working with TechCorp all along, but only because I knew they would eventually become a target. And if I played my cards right, I would come out on top." Sam's heart sank. This was worse than she had feared. Gavin hadn't just been a double agent, he had orchestrated their downfall from the start. "But why help us?" Carla asked, her voice quiet but deadly. Gavin's lips twisted into a smile. "Because, in the end, I wanted the power for myself. TechCorp is a behemoth, but I could do more with the right leverage. And now, I have it. All of you, your knowledge, your access to those documents, you're the perfect tools to help me rise." Sam and the others stood in stunned silence, trying to process Gavin's words. The betrayal was complete. For a moment, Sam felt the weight of it all, of everything they had fought for, of every step they had taken. It all felt like it was slipping away. But then, something inside her clicked. She wasn't going to let Gavin win. Not after everything they had sacrificed. "This ends now," Sam said, her voice filled with resolve. "You've made a big mistake, Gavin." The last piece of the puzzle had fallen into place. TechCorp wasn't their only enemy. They had been fighting a battle on two fronts all along. But now they had the truth, and they weren't backing down. With or without Gavin, Sam was going to see this through. TechCorp was going down, and nothing, no betrayal, no scheme, could stop them now. The weight of betrayal still lingered in the room. Gavin's words hung in the air like smoke, suffocating everything they had worked for. But despite the chilling truth of his double-dealing, Sam and her team weren't about to back down. They had come too far, and too many lives were at stake. Sam exchanged a quick glance with Henry. There was a quiet understanding between them, a recognition of the battle they still had to fight. Gavin might have played them, but he wasn't going to stop their mission. Not today. Not ever. "You're right," Sam said, her voice steady, though her heart pounded. "You've been playing both sides, but you underestimated one thing: we've already won." Gavin's eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about?" Carla stepped forward, her gaze sharp and unwavering. "We already have everything we need to bring TechCorp down. You thought you could use us to climb the ladder, but you forgot one thing: we've been tracking every move you've made, every conversation, every exchange. Your loyalty is already compromised. TechCorp won't trust you anymore." The truth hit Gavin harder than Sam had anticipated. For a split second, he looked rattled, his confidence slipping. But it was only momentary. Gavin regained his composure, leaning back in his chair with a smirk. "Do you think TechCorp will just fold? They'll wipe the evidence. They have the power." "I have the power," Gavin scoffed, standing up. "You're just kids who've stumbled into something much bigger than yourselves." Henry stepped forward, his voice low and firm. "We're not kids, Gavin. And we're not done yet." Sam was already one step ahead. As Gavin continued to bluster, she reached into her bag, pulling out a flash drive that held the final, irrefutable evidence. The documents, every last shred of evidence that would expose TechCorp's corruption, their manipulation, and their crimes, were ready to be broadcast to the world. "We don't need you," Sam said, her voice cutting through the tension. "We'll make sure TechCorp's darkest secrets are exposed, whether you like it or not." The plan was simple yet incredibly risky. Gavin might have thought he was the one controlling the game, but they had already placed their cards on the table. The media channels were ready. The government officials who could act were in motion. And the final release, an exposé that would shake the world, was set to go live in less than an hour. But even with everything in place, Sam couldn't help but feel the weight of uncertainty pressing down on her. What if they weren't quick enough? What if TechCorp found a way to stop them? What if Gavin, despite everything, was right and they were too small, too powerless, to make a difference? Henry seemed to sense her unease. "We've already done the hard part," he said, his voice reassuring. "Now, all we have to do is make sure they don't stop us. And we'll make sure they don't." Sam nodded, clenching her fists in determination. "We're not giving up. We've come too far." The clock ticked down. The final moments before the exposé would be published seemed to drag on, every second filled with anticipation, dread, and hope. Sam and her team were gathered around a single computer, watching as the first pieces of the story began to hit the wire. News outlets began picking up the story. Major newspapers published the documents with bold headlines. TechCorp, the corruption we never knew, screamed one of the top stories. Social media exploded with outrage as whistleblowers and activists took to their platforms, demanding accountability. The world was waking up to the truth, and the power dynamics that had once been impenetrable were beginning to crumble. But just as Sam allowed herself a moment of relief, an alert popped up on her screen. "Message from Carla, TechCorp's already trying to cover it up. They've sent in their legal teams, and they're attempting to discredit the documents. You have to act fast." Sam's heart skipped a beat. The battle wasn't over yet. TechCorp had the resources to manipulate the media, to create a narrative, and to erase the truth. But Sam wasn't about to let them succeed. "Get ready," Sam said, turning to Henry and Carla. "We need to make sure this goes all the way. We can't let them twist the story." With the media on their side, Sam knew the next step was to ensure that the government stepped in. There was no turning back. The truth was out there, and it wasn't going to be buried. As the clock struck the hour, the final push was made. The exposé was everywhere. Legal teams at TechCorp scrambled to respond, their spokespersons attempting to sway public opinion, but it was too late. The floodgates had opened, and the truth couldn't be contained anymore. Sam's phone rang, interrupting the chaos around her. She picked it up quickly, her breath shallow. It was a number she didn't recognize, but she answered anyway. "Sam." The voice on the other end was familiar, though it sounded strained. "Robert?" she asked, already anticipating the urgency in his voice. "Listen to me carefully," Robert said, his tone sharp. "TechCorp's trying to suppress the story, but there's more going on. They've been covering up something far bigger than you realize. You need to get out of there, now. The people who've been helping you, they're not who they say they are. Get to safety, and I'll explain later." Sam's mind raced. It was one thing to be on the verge of bringing down a corporation, but now it seemed there were even bigger forces at play, forces that were willing to go to any lengths to keep the truth buried. But she couldn't back down now. She had already come too far. "Robert, what are you saying?" Sam pressed, her voice shaky. "There's no time. Trust me," Robert said, cutting her off. "You need to move. Get Henry, Carla, and go." Sam's stomach churned with fear, but she knew one thing for certain, they weren't finished yet. The final chapter of this story was still being written. As she turned to Henry and Carla, the gravity of their situation hit her all over again. The world was watching, but there were still dangers lurking in the shadows. Sam wasn't going to let them win, not when the truth was finally out. They still had a choice, fight or run. But Sam knew, no matter what came next, she was ready to face it head-on. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?